Chapter 1907. SS. The name of Zhuan silently sensed the violent power of Tao intent in his body, as well as the power of void sky contained within the 8th level Tao intent. He knew very well that this power had been left in the Tao intent crystal by Tai Ching beforehand. Zhuan slowly hovered in the air. His long hair had already been dyed purple, and his eyes were also purple. He rose higher and higher, looking down at the vast and magnificent region of the Tai Ching immortal realm. Before you leave, let everyone in the Tai Ching immortal realm know the name of Zhuan, the name of Tai Ching's disciple, Jun. Tai Ching's voice slowly rang out in Zhuan's mind. Zhuan raised his head slightly. His purple eyes pierced through the endless space and landed on the Hall of Virtue in the distance. At the top of the Hall of Virtue, Tai Ching stood with his hands behind his back. There was a hint of a smile on his lips as he met Zhuan's eyes. Zhuan had a thoughtful expression. In the end, he nodded slightly. Then he turned his head and looked in another direction. He discovered a blood cloud in the sky in that direction. The blood cloud was extremely vast, and it was heading toward Zhuan at an extremely fast speed. Is that the 10th blood protector of the blood god hall, Shui Yun? That's a true god of 2 disasters. Even such a terrifying assassin has been sent out. No, it's not just the 10th blood protector. Look, there are 2 more figures in the sky above the blood cloud. They're the 9th blood protector, Shui Guillotine, and the 8th blood protector, Shui Tiger. The surrounding cultivators also noticed the blood cloud drifting over from the horizon. Moreover, they saw 2 other powerful figures above the blood cloud. Someone actually destroyed the Grand Sanguine Killing Formation. This is the first time I've seen something like this. Are you the one who destroyed the formation? The blood cloud instantly enveloped the sky. Within the blood cloud, a pair of scarlet eyes opened and stared coldly at Tun. At this moment, the power of void sky in Zhuan's body was constantly awakening. The 3 blood protectors did not notice this powerful force. Instead, they noticed the purple mist and rain above Zhuan's head. An early-stage god can actually comprehend 8th level Tao intent? How did he do it? The pair of eyes in the blood cloud narrowed, revealing a rare trace of fear. The flying guillotine and blood tiger above the blood cloud also showed a cautious look. The 3 of them happened to be carrying out a mission nearby. When the Great Sanguine Killing Array was activated, they naturally sensed it early on. In the beginning, they didn't care too much about it. They knew very well that once the Great Sanguine Killing Array was activated, the person being chased would definitely die. However, when the Great Blood Killing Array was destroyed, the 3 of them were truly shocked. That was why they had come together. Soon after, they saw Zhuan bathing in the purple rain. Seeing the 3 blood guardians descend together, many people around were in awe. It should be known that they were the blood guardians of the blood temple. They were 1 level higher than the blood assassins. Their hands were stained with the blood of many real gods. Zhuan's eyes were calm. He could clearly feel that his life force was running out, but he was willing to let the Tai Ching Wonderland completely remember his name, Zhuan, in this final period of time. Since Tai Ching had given him the power of void sky, it was up to Zhuan to decide how to use it. Let's try this power, Zhuan muttered softly. He took a step forward and instantly passed through the blood cloud above him. Even the 10th blood guardian, Shui Yun, didn't expect Zhuan's speed to be so fast. When he reacted, Zhuan had already appeared a few hundred meters behind Shui Yun. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, countless purple rain burst out from within the blood cloud. The purple rain was like a flood, completely washing away the blood cloud. When the blood cloud disappeared, a bald man in blood armor within the blood cloud widened his eyes and fell to the ground from midair. In between his eyebrows, there was a hole. Within the hole, there was a purple light flickering. The moment Zhuan attacked and killed Shui Yun, Shui Hu and the flying guillotine looked at each other in shock. Immediately after, they fled in 2 different directions. The 2 of them knew very well that although they were stronger than Shui Yun, there was a limit to their strength. The guy in front of them who had comprehended level 8 Tao meaning could kill Shui Yun instantly. It wouldn't be difficult for him to kill them. However, what they couldn't figure out was how the young man in front of them was able to kill Shui Yun, a 2 calamity true god, with a single attack. Zhuan looked at the fleeing Shui Hu and the flying guillotine indifferently. He was surprised by the power of void sky power that suddenly filled his body. His Dao meaning was still improving, but the speed was much slower than before. There was still a long way to go before he reached the peak of level 8 Dao meaning. Zhuan looked at the divine sword in his hand silently. He noticed that the divine sword in his hand was completely broken. He knew that this divine sword was just an ordinary heavenly god tool that he had obtained from Yang Tong. Just now, he had only used void sky power once, but the sword couldn't withstand it and had started to crack. It seems that this sword can only withstand void sky power once more, right? Zhuan murmured. His right hand formed a claw and the divine sword was split into two. Then, Zhuan's right hand quickly patted the two pieces of the sword twice. The two pieces of the sword carried the purple rain and shot out explosively, leaving behind a dazzling purple trail in the air. Shui Hu and the flying guillotine naturally felt the sharp sound of the air breaking behind them. They knew that Zhuan had already launched his attack. We have to block it. This was the only thought in their minds. Therefore, both of them used their strongest techniques at the same time. Shui Hu bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. He used the power of his blood essence to condense a huge blood tiger that could shake heaven and earth. The blood tiger's power was terrifying. Its roar was enough to kill any heavenly god, and its claw was enough to tear a true god apart. On the other hand, the flying guillotine took out a blood-red gear-like weapon. He held the blood-red gear-like weapon and suddenly spun it. Then, the blood-red gear-like weapon drew a blood-red arc in the sky and heavily blocked in front of him. Unfortunately, the moment Shui Hu and the blood-red gear-like weapon came into contact with the broken sword that carried the purple rain, they exploded into a rain of blood. The two pieces of the sword instantly pierced through the foreheads of Shui Hu and the flying guillotine, destroying the depths of their souls and causing them to fall. At this moment, the scene was terrifyingly silent. The numerous onlookers were all dumbstruck. Shui Yun, Shui Hu, and the flying guillotine were 3 of the 10 great blood guardians of the divine blood hall. Yet they were killed just like that? Only with pressure comes motivation. The peak of the 8th level Dao insight, and whether or not I can release a trace of the 9th level Dao insight, I must give myself enough pressure. Zhuan, who was floating in the air, looked through the clouds and mist and landed on the divine blood hall that was similarly far away. Zhuan made a grabbing motion with his right hand, and the purple rain around him ceaselessly surged and condensed in his palm. In the end, it formed a divine sword that flickered with purple light. Yun knew that a divine sword formed from Dao insight was sufficient to withstand the power of the void. The divine blood hall, Yun took a step into the air, and the surrounding purple rain and purple mist in the sky all dispersed and vanished without a trace. On the other hand, he transformed into a purple shadow and vanished on the spot. That's the direction of the divine blood hall. Could it be that this kid wants to go to the divine blood hall to cause trouble? Although the deaths of Shui Yun and the other 2 had caused many cultivators to be stunned, their attention was still on Zhuan. At this moment, when they saw Zhuan explode towards a certain direction, it instantly caused many people to speculate. But even more so, many cultivators withdrew their respective flying artifacts and flew towards the divine blood hall. They really wanted to see if Zhuan really dared to charge into the divine blood hall alone. Senior Sister Jinghai? Lian Meng had also summoned her flying artifact. She wanted to follow the group, but very soon she saw Jinghai and Bai Shuang who were also following behind them. Jinghai also noticed Lian Meng. Her expression became rather unnatural. She sent a message to Lian Meng. Junior Sister Lian Meng, I misunderstood Junior Brother Zhua before. I hope Junior Sister Lian Meng doesn't blame Senior Sister for her actions before. Lian Meng shook her head. Since it's a misunderstanding, let's forget about it. Let's go up and take a look. I'm still slightly worried about Junior Brother Zhua. Jinghai nodded. Afterwards, the 3 of them turned into a streak of light and flew towards the divine blood hall. The divine blood hall stood at the center of a range of bloody mountains. Bright-colored rivers of blood flowed around the mountains, forming a ring-shaped river. At this moment, 10 pillars of blood stood within the divine blood hall. The 7th pillar slowly sank, and a blood coffin appeared. The 10th, 9th, and 8th brothers are all dead. What's going on? A man in a blood-colored robe walked out from the blood coffin. His voice was hoarse and deep. 7th brother, go and investigate. Not only are the 3 of them dead, I can also sense that the great bloody killing formation that was set up before has been destroyed. It's probably done by the same person. A cold voice sounded from the first pillar of blood. The blood-robed man nodded, and then quickly left the hall. However, when the blood-robed man had just left the Divine Blood Hall and was floating in the air above the Divine Blood Hall, planning to fly in the direction where Shui Yun and the others had died, a purple figure rapidly flew in front of him. What's that? The blood-robed man had only spoken a single sentence when a purple sword slashed towards him like a bolt of lightning. His head was immediately separated from his body. The eyes of his head that had been sent flying were still open. Naturally, he could clearly see the person who had beheaded him. The person had a head of purple hair and held a purple sword. An extremely profound and terrifying aura surged from his body. When the blood-robed man looked at the figure slowly turned around. A pair of purple eyes indifferently glanced at the blood-robed man's head. Afterwards, the blood-robed man discovered to his horror that the purple sword in the person's right hand had slashed out again and landed on his head. The blood-robed man's head was directly slashed into 2. The energy of the 8th level Dao insight was like a gale that tore the blood-robed man's soul into pieces. Zhuan put away the purple sword and looked down indifferently at the enormous blood-red hall that was enveloped by countless bloody mountains below. He knew that this blood-red hall was the Divine Blood Hall. When Zhuowen killed the man in the blood-red robe in an instant, many cultivators who had followed behind him saw the scene as well. Many cultivators recognized that the blood-robed man that had been killed was the 7th blood guardian of the Divine Blood Hall, Xueqi. Chapter 1908. SS Shui Shushing. The fall of Xueqi instantly alarmed the Divine Blood Hall. Streaks of blood shadows shot out from the surrounding blood mountains. There were even some blood shadows that shot out from the blood rivers that surrounded the blood mountains. These were all assassins that the Divine Blood Hall had nurtured. Usually, the assassins of the Divine Blood Hall would hide in the blood mountains and blood rivers around the Divine Blood Hall to cultivate. Once someone invaded the Divine Blood Hall, these well-trained assassins would work together and kill the intruder with a single strike. Only the 10 great blood guardians and the hall master of the Divine Blood Hall, the Blood God, had the right to enter the Divine Blood Hall to cultivate. The other assassins could only cultivate outside the Divine Blood Hall. The densely packed blood shadows flickered in the surrounding space like demons and monsters in the night. The cultivators that followed behind all paled when they saw these terrifying blood shadows constantly flickering. Under the encirclement of so many blood shadows, any one of them would die without a doubt. It was impossible for them to survive. Zhuan silently floated in the air as he stared at the blood shadows that constantly darted around him. He didn't take them too seriously. The improvement of Dao intent wasn't without reason. It required external pressure. The Dao intent within the Dao intent crystal had already reached the peak of the 8th level. Zhuan didn't need to comprehend it at all. As time slowly passed, the Dao intent within his body would reach the peak of the 8th level on its own. However, Yuan didn't have much time left. He couldn't wait slowly. He needed sufficient pressure. Tai Ching also knew that Zhuowen's Dao intent needed pressure to improve, so he injected the power of Void Heaven into the Dao intent crystal. My name is Zhuowen, the second disciple of Tai Ching's master. I've heard that the Divine Blood Hall must kill those on the Blood Slaughter token. Today, I've come with the Blood Slaughter token to teach you. Yuan twirled the purple sword in his right hand around his waist. The assassins hidden within a kilometer of him were all forced out. Moreover, these assassins didn't even have time to react before they exploded into a bloody mist. They couldn't be more dead. Zhuowen's move was too powerful. The blood shadows that were 1,000 meters away all froze and didn't dare to come within 1,000 meters of Zhuan. Seeing that the Blood Divine Hall was not moving, Yuan slashed down with the violet sword in his right hand. The terrifying violet sword light turned into a crescent moon as it fell down. In the end, it landed heavily on the Blood Divine Hall. This sword was too powerful. If it struck the divine blood hall, it would definitely shatter it. However, when the sword light landed on the blood god temple, a huge bloody hand stretched out and grabbed the sword light. Then, the hand tightened and the purple sword light was destroyed. Grand Pure One's disciple? You really have guts. You only borrowed the power of empty sky, yet you dare to barge into my divine blood temple alone. You're simply courting death. A cold voice sounded. Immediately, the blood god temple emitted a terrifying bloody light. The blood-red light wriggled and eventually formed a gigantic blood-red face. As soon as the blood-red face appeared, a bloodthirsty and terrifying pressure spread out around the blood god temple. The blood mountains collapsed and the blood rivers churned. Some of the cultivators closer to the blood god temple spat out mouthfuls of blood and suffered minor injuries. They quickly retreated and distanced themselves. After the blood-red face appeared, 6 rays of blood-red light shot out from the blood god temple. These 6 rays of blood-red light were the 6 blood coffins of the 6 blood pillars inside the blood god temple. Not good, the blood god and the remaining blood guardians have all come out. It seems like the blood god really wants to teach Xuan a lesson. The blood god is a void sky rank elder of the Grand Pure One immortal realm. If the blood god comes out, I think Honorable Tai Ching won't leave him alone. Everyone was discussing whether or not Xue Shen would attack a junior. Juan stared at the gigantic blood-red face, and his heart trembled. The blood god's strength was definitely not ordinary. He was an almighty in the void sky rank. Even though Zhuan had grasped the power of empty sky and combined it with his 8th level Dao intent, there was still a huge gap between him and the blood god. Blood god, as an elder, are you planning to interfere with the matters of the younger generation? A calm voice was heard. Then, an old Taoist rode on a green ox and flew over on a green cloud. Beside him was an old man with messy hair. Honorable Tai Ching, Honorable Yu Qing. The moment they saw the two people, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people were in awe. Both Tai Ching and Yu Qing stood at the peak of the heaven realm in Huaxia. They were 2 of the 3 pure ones, and the 3 pure ones were the rulers of the heaven realm. In front of these 2, the blood god was on a lower level. Sure enough, the blood god's expression changed slightly when he saw the 2. He said in a low voice, Honorable Tai Ching, the blood god temple and the Daoda temple have always minded our own business. Although the Daoda temple is the leader of the temples, you don't have to bully the blood god temple, right? Tai Ching shook his head and said with a smile, Blood god, the Daoda temple didn't bully the blood god temple. It was your assassins who chased after my disciple for no reason. The blood god was silent. He naturally saw the blood-red light on Zhuowen's body. That was the sign of the blood kill order. Even if Tai Ching didn't say anything, the blood god could guess what happened next. Blood cloud, blood guillotine, blood tiger, and blood pool were killed by your disciple. Many assassins of the blood god temple have died in his hands. I think this is enough to pay the price of the blood kill order, right? The blood god said coldly. Tai Ching glanced at Zhuowen and said, I've always respected others and let nature take its course. It's the same for my disciple. I also respect his thoughts. You should say this to my disciple. The blood god looked at Zhuowen. Just as he was about to speak, Yuan waved the purple sword in his right hand. Many blood shadows on the right were annihilated by the sword light. I have heard of the blood god temple. They have done many things in the dark in the Tai Ching Wonderland. Every assassin here has blood on their hands. Since I have the blood kill order, I ask the blood god temple to act impartially and chase after me until I die. Zhuowen slowly put away his purple sword. His gaze landed on the enormous blood-red face as he spoke word by word. The blood god's face froze and there was anger in the depths of his eyes. If Tai Ching wasn't here, he would have killed Zhuowen with one palm. Lord Blood God, let me kill this person. Since Honorable Tai Ching respects the other party and Zhuowen provoked us first, we will kill this Zhuowen. I hope Honorable Tai Ching won't blame us. Suddenly, the second blood coffin opened abruptly, and a handsome man dressed like an ordinary scholar walked out from it. His blood-red clothes fluttered in the wind. However, this man had blood hair and didn't have the elegant temperament of a scholar. Instead, he was full of evil. The second blood guardian of the blood god temple, Xue Shushu, is a true virtual sky realm cultivator. It's said that Xue Shushu condensed the virtual sky bridge in his body not long ago. He only needs to take one step on the virtual sky bridge to reach the 10,000 longevity realm. When the blood scholar took the initiative to volunteer, the surrounding people were shocked. Obviously, the blood scholar was very famous in the Taiching celestial realm. Brother Zhua, today's battle between you and me shall be fought to the death. The blood scholar slowly took a step forward and bowed to Zhua. However, the moment the blood scholar bowed, a blood shadow shot out from the back of his collar. The blood shadow was extremely fast. It came straight at Zhua Wen's head in an instant. Everyone was shocked. They didn't expect the blood scholar to be so sinister and attack before the battle even started. If ordinary people encountered the blood scholar's move, most of them would be caught off guard and panic. Zhuan frowned and waved the purple sword in his right hand, cutting the blood shadow in half. He also realized that the blood shadow's true appearance was just a blood python. Just as his attention was focused on the blood python that had been killed, the blood scholar had already appeared beside Zhuo Wen with a mysterious footwork. A blood-red folding fan had appeared in the blood scholar's hand at some point in time. The blood scholar gently opened the folding fan and countless blood threads swept out. These blood threads were constantly pulsating like the veins in a living creature's body as they wrapped around Zhuan. Zhuan slashed with his sword and all the blood threads were shattered. Zhuan twisted his right hand and the purple sword left his hand. It spun around from the side and slashed at the blood scholar. The moment Zhuan threw the purple sword, he waved his right hand and a thick purple mist condensed above him. The purple mist then started to rain. There was an extremely mysterious meaning spreading in the area where the purple rain fell. At the same time, the heaven-devouring eye between Zhuowen's eyebrows opened and released a wisp of the power of time and space that it contained. The power of time and space was instantly amplified by 8 times in the area of the purple rain. In an instant, the surrounding time and space completely froze. It was as if the cold air had frozen a river. Everything was still. The blood scholar was caught off guard and was immediately affected by the power of time and space. Originally, he wanted to dodge the purple sword that was flying toward him. However, under the influence of the power of time and space, his body immediately froze. He could only watch as the purple sword pierced his head. Bang! However, the moment the purple sword entered the blood scholar's head, a blood sword appeared in front of the purple sword and flicked it away. The owner of the blood sword also retreated dozens of steps from the recoil. Zhuan caught the purple sword and narrowed his eyes. He stared at the figure that held the blood sword and retreated dozens of steps. The person was dressed in plain clothes and was around 30 years old. His appearance was ordinary and there was nothing special about him. The only noteworthy thing about him was the blood sword in his hand. The blood sword was filled with blood qi and surged with killing intent. There was no doubt that the blood sword had killed countless living creatures to cultivate such a terrifying ferocity. The blood sword of the first blood guardian of the blood shrine. The man said calmly. Then, the blood sword slashed out a few times. Blood light burst forth and the surrounding power of time and space was directly shattered. The blood scholar's face paled slightly when the power of time and space was broken. He landed beside the blood sword and respectfully clasped his fist. You can't stop me if I want to kill him. Chapter 1909. 1909th. Violet sword and blood sword narrowed his eyes. There was a bloodthirsty light in the depths of his eyes. He snorted coldly and slashed out with blood sword in his right hand. Immediately, a wisp of blood flames shot out from the blade of blood sword. The blood flames were very terrifying. The instant they shot out, they seemed to stretch across the horizon as if they had split the entire horizon in half. The heaven-devouring eye between Zhuowen's brows split open again. At this moment, he used the power of the 8th level Dao insight to execute the heaven-devouring eye. Crackle! Suddenly, purplish-black lightning shot out from the heaven-devouring eye again. At this moment, the purplish-black lightning was much more terrifying than before. The purplish-black lightning bolts, supported by the 8th level Dao insight, looked down upon everything. They were extremely terrifying. They were like the mouth of a giant beast that swallowed the blood flames that stretched across the horizon in one gulp. However, the blood flames were not simple either. The instant the purplish-black lightning swallowed the blood flames suddenly exploded. For a moment, the purplish-black lightning and blood flames in the sky began a terrifying entanglement. The energy ripples produced every time they entangled were enough to make the spectating cultivators tremble in fear. Zhuan did not slow down at all as he charged towards Blood Scholar. The power of time and space within his heaven-devouring eye surged out again, completely freezing the space within the range of the purple rain within this point in time. Blood Scholar's gaze was gloomy. The power of time and space supported by the 8th level Dao insight still affected him quite a bit. At the very least, his speed and movements had been greatly reduced. Blood Sword sneered coldly. He could sever the power of time and space before, so he could naturally sever it now. In his opinion, Zhuan's actions were completely futile. However, when Blood Sword slashed out, he suddenly felt an extremely powerful sense of stagnation. His next attack was actually unable to tear apart the surrounding power of time and space. The power of time and space has strengthened? Blood Sword was in the purple rain, but he quickly discovered that the power of time and space had not strengthened. It was the surrounding purple rain that had strengthened. In other words, Zhuan's own Dao insight had strengthened. Not too far away, Sky Dao revealed an expression of admiration as he watched this scene. He knew that Zhuan's Dao insight had already attained the peak of the 8th level, and Zhuan was only a step away from touching the 9th level. The moment Xue Jian hesitated, Zhuan immediately swept past him. The purple sword was extremely fast and slashed across Xue Jian's body. Soon after, Xue Jian's head flew into the air and exploded into a bloody mist. Plop! The headless corpse of the Blood Scholar fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. Boom! Boom! At the same time, the surrounding space-time power was torn apart by the Blood Sword. The Blood Sword's expression was gloomy. He had not expected that the power of Dao insight on Zhuan's body was still increasing. In a moment of carelessness, he had actually allowed Zhuan to chop off the Blood Scholar's head. After chopping off the Blood Scholar's head, Zhuan frowned slightly. In order to completely kill the Blood Scholar, Zhuan had chopped off his head and destroyed it so that he could annihilate the Blood Scholar's spirit. However, the moment the Blood Scholar's head was destroyed, Zhuan discovered that the Blood Scholar's vitality had not been cut off. He was just much weaker than before. In other words, the Blood Scholar whose spirit had been destroyed was not dead. What's going on? Zhuan lowered his head and suddenly saw the headless corpse of the Blood Scholar squirming continuously. Then the Blood Scholar slowly stood up, and a new head grew from his neck. The Blood Scholar's face was pale. He glared at Zhuan with extreme resentment, but immediately retreated to the Blood God's side. The weakness of virtual sky world cultivators is no longer the spirit, but the virtual sky bridge in their bodies. If the spirit is destroyed, the virtual sky bridge will naturally condense a new spirit. However, if the virtual sky bridge is destroyed, the virtual sky world cultivator will definitely die. Blood Sword's face was filled with a cold smile. He continued, "You're only in the early stage of the heavenly god realm, but you have the power of the virtual sky world. This power is not yours, right? Otherwise, how could you not know the weakness of virtual sky world cultivators?" Speaking up to there, a hint of disdain appeared on Blood Sword's face. He stopped talking and took a step forward, instantly arriving in front of Zhuan. Blood Dragon slashes the sky. Blood Sword slashed out again. This time, the sword chi was like blood, condensing into the shadow of a huge dragon. The huge dragon's body wrapped around Zhuan like a hunting python. Then the dragon opened its mouth and swallowed Zhuan from above his head. Blood Sword stepped on the dragon's body and rapidly approached Zhuan. The tip of the Blood Sword in his hand pierced toward Zhuan's vital points. At this moment, Zhuan was practically surrounded by enemies from both front and back. However, Zhuan was very calm. He used profound steps and continuously moved around the dragon's body. Clang! Blood Sword was extremely fast. Everyone could only see a bloody shadow as it pierced toward Zhuowen's forehead. Zhuowen was naturally not to be outdone. He also stabbed out with his purple sword. The purple rain falling from the sky suddenly changed from a continuous drizzle to a violent storm. The purple storm accompanied the purple storm. In an instant, the power of Tao intent reached the limit. Bang bang bang. The purple storm, the blood-red dragon, and the purple and blood swords constantly clashed. Every clear sound that rang out was like a great bell, reverberating in everyone's ears. Moreover, the sound became louder and louder, as if it was echoing in the valley, constantly repeating itself. The weaker cultivators covered their ears with a ferocious expression. 2 streaks of blood flowed from their ears, and their eyes were bloodshot. They could not help but retreat. Lian Meng, Jing Hai, and Bai Shuang also involuntarily retreated. However, not long after they retreated, a gust of wind blew over and brought them to where Tai Ching and Yu Qing were. "Master! Martial Uncle Yu Qing!" Lian Meng said joyfully. "Sovereign Tai Ching! Venerable Yu Qing!" Jing Hai and Bai Shuang cupped their fists respectfully and said, "Master, will junior brother Zhuo be fine?" Lian Meng suddenly asked. Tai Ching did not answer Lian Meng's question. Instead, he said in a low voice, "Let's continue watching. Zhuowen has his own choice." Lian Meng seemed to understand, but she did not say anything else. Instead, she seriously looked at Zhuowen, who was constantly fighting with the blood sword. For some reason, Lian Meng thought back to half a year ago when Zhuowen had just entered the sect. His expression was like that of a country bumpkin entering a city. Even the steps Lian Meng displayed in front of Zhuowen shocked him. But now, Zhuowen had suddenly comprehended 8 levels of Tao intent, obtained Void Sky power, and engaged in a world-shaking battle with the Void Sky First Blood Guardian, Xuejian. The powerful figure of her junior brother from back then and the little junior brother from today constantly intersected in Lian Meng's mind. In the end, Lian Meng's heart was filled with complicated feelings. "Master, am I too useless? Although I've advanced to true God, my strength is actually inferior to some peak heavenly God cultivators." Lian Meng suddenly said dejectedly. Tai Ching patted Lian Meng's head and said with a smile, "You're still young and lack experience. You'll become more and more powerful in the future." Lian Meng shook her head and said, "I'm not serious enough. I'm not focused enough. I'm not hardworking enough. When we return, I'll cultivate properly. Master, help me increase my combat experience." Tai Ching smiled and said, "All right." At this moment, the battle between Zhuowen and Xuejian had almost reached a white-hot stage. The violent purple rain and the burning dragon almost dyed the entire sky purple and blood red. Zhuowen and Xuejian were too fast. Everyone could only see purple shadow and Xuejian in the sky. Moreover, they could only barely see them when the 2 figures clashed. Xue Shusheng stood beside Xuexin and stared at purple shadow and Xuejian in the sky with extreme fear. Xuejian was the Blood God Palace's first blood guardian, and his strength was far above Xue Shusheng's. Xue Shusheng had just condensed the Void Sky Bridge, so it could only be said that he had yet to enter the virtual sky world. However, Xuejian was different. Xuejian had condensed the Void Sky Bridge a long time ago. It was said that he had already ascended the first step of the Void Sky Bridge and reached the terrifying level of longevity. Moreover, so much time had passed, so Xue Shusheng knew that it was impossible for Xuejian to not improve at all. It was very likely that Xuejian had ascended the second step of the Void Sky Bridge and obtained an undying body. Of course, all of this was just a guess. From the fact that Zhuowen could fight Xuejian to such an extent, it was enough to see how terrifying and powerful Zhuowen was. If Xue Shusheng could choose again, he definitely would not stand out and face Zhuowen head-on. However, Xuejian's brows furrowed even tighter as the battle went on. He realized that Tun was getting stronger and stronger as the battle went on. It was as if the potential in Zhuowen's body was constantly being stimulated as the battle went on. Moreover, Zhuowen's every move seemed to be at his fingertips. It was clearly an extremely simple sword move, but its might was terrifyingly powerful with the support of a peak 8th level Tao will. Even if Xuejian used all his skills and got close to Zhuowen, Yun would always use the power of time and space within the eye of Heaven's devourer to freeze Xue Jian's body. Although the time he was frozen was very short, it was enough for Zhuowen to retreat calmly. The purple sword and Xue Jian collided once more. Purple and blood-red sword lights poured out like rainbows that were dazzling and colorful. After that, Zhuowen and Xue Jian both grunted and retreated several kilometers. Every step they took left extremely tragic footprints in the air. Zhuowen steadied himself and stared at the violent purple rain around him. His eyes were filled with confusion. However, his confusion was quickly replaced by clarity. The purple rain made him think of the Yellow Springs water droplets. Back then, he had relied on collecting the Yellow Springs water droplets to condense the Yellow Springs ocean. It surged violently and stretched as far as the eye could see. Accumulated water into a stream into a lake. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Suddenly, the purple sword in his right hand shook. Instantly, the falling purple rain stopped in midair. Next, Zhuowen twisted the purple sword. Instantly, the stagnant purple rain began to condense and combine with Zhuowen as the center. When a boundless purple lake formed beneath Zhuowen's feet, a profound concept suddenly erupted from Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen stood at the center of the purple lake. His gaze passed through the lake and landed on Xue Jian, whose expression had changed drastically. Master, this is the last time I'll call you master. Although it's only a sliver, I'm sure it's the concept of the 9th level Dao insight that you want. Zhuowen's calm voice slowly resounded in the center of the purple lake. Then Zhuowen raised the purple sword and pointed it at Xue Jian. He then placed the purple sword under the surface of the lake and slashed upwards. The waves were so high that they could drown the entire sky. The waves were so high that they were terrifying. The cultivators who were looking up at the waves all felt their hearts beat wildly. It was as if their hearts were in their throats because of the waves. Chapter 1910. Legend. After the purple wave drowned the blood sword, it poured down from the sky and landed in an area of tens of thousands of miles around the blood god temple. The countless assassins scattered around the blood god temple were caught off guard and were all drowned by the wave. Their bodies were crushed and not even their bones were left. The purple wave was like an angry dragon as it poured down, instantly submerging the area around the divine blood temple. The blood mountains that stood around the divine blood temple all collapsed. The ground caved in, forming a huge crater. The river of blood was replaced by a purple lake. Seeing this, Xue Jian's eyes were filled with rage and shock. This was the first time he had seen a purple lake formed by Dao intent. Without a doubt, the Dao intent in this purple lake was even more terrifying than an 8th level Dao intent. 9th level Dao intent? Did he really comprehend the 9th level Dao intent? Blood God quickly recalled what Zhuowen had said before. But now that the purple wave had fallen, Blood God had no time to think. Blood God reached out his hand and grabbed the 5 blood guardians. At the same time, he reached out his other hand and reached into the purple wave to find the blood sword that was washed away by the wave. However, Blood God's face suddenly turned gloomy. He found that when his bloody hand reached deep into the waves, a powerful force acted on his hand and forced his hand to stop. Moreover, the purple wave contained an extremely mysterious power. The moment it hit the blood hand, it caused the blood energy on the surface of the blood hand to dissipate. It was as if the purple liquid contained countless sharp saber lights. They were densely packed and cut the surface of the bloody hand, weakening the energy of the bloody hand. Break! Blood God snorted and the blood hand grew again. It expanded from tens of thousands of feet to hundreds of thousands of feet and even millions of feet. A bloody hand, like a dark cloud, covered the sky of this area. However, when the blood hand grew to this size, Zhuowen, who was standing in the center of the purple lake, looked at it coldly. He waved the purple sword in his right hand and the entire purple lake began to boil. Countless drops of purple liquid from the purple lake merged into the purple sword. The purple sword shot out. As it flew, countless drops of purple liquid gathered and began to expand. When the purple lake completely merged with the purple sword became 1,000,000 feet long. The purple sword covered the sky and the sun. When it was unleashed, the world darkened and the sun and moon lost their light. Zhuowen had completely fused the strand of 9th level Dao insight that he'd released into the violet sword with this strike. This sword strike was definitely the strongest sword strike Zhuowen had ever executed in his entire life. The purple sword was extremely fast. It suddenly swept past the huge blood hand and blood god. Then the hand was blood god. The purple sword cut the hand. After the violet sword slashed through the bloody hand, it continued on its way to the blood god hall that was protected by the blood god. The blood god was indeed powerful. The purple waves formed by the purple lake were extremely powerful. They almost completely destroyed the surroundings of the blood god temple. However, the blood god temple where the blood god resided was enveloped by a blood-red energy. The purple wave was unable to break through this blood-red energy, and this was the power of the blood god. However, when the terrifying purple sword descended, blood god's expression finally changed. He didn't take Zhuowen seriously at all. Even if Zhuowen possessed an 8th level Dao insight and possessed void energy, he knew that it wasn't Zhuowen's own strength, and everything was just external things. If he attacked, he could kill Zhuowen in one move. But now, the purple sword contained a trace of 9th level Dao intent. It was something that Zhuowen had comprehended from the peak of the 8th level Dao intent. Although it was only a trace of 9th level Dao intent, it gave blood god a strong sense of danger. He had to be careful. At the same time, blood god looked at Zhuowen in shock and anger. He could not imagine how Zhuowen had comprehended 9th level Dao intent. It was beyond his expectations. The purple sword was too huge. When it fell, it was like a huge purple waterfall from the 9 heavens. It connected the sky and the earth. Everyone around was dumbfounded. They were no fools. They could all feel the terrifying destructive power contained within the purple sword. On the other hand, Tai Ching and Yu Qing exchanged a glance. They could see the sharpness and brilliance in each other's eyes. Junior brother, Lian Meng stood beside Tai Ching. Her heart was beating wildly. Especially when she saw the terrifying purple sword, she even felt like worshipping it. Bang! Under everyone's gaze, the purple sword fell and heavily smashed into the sky above the Blood God Palace. Blood God did not hold back. He did not care about the energy in the purple sword, but he had to care about the trace of 9th level Dao intent. Blood style. Blood God roared. A cloud of blood mist exploded from his body. The blood mist condensed into a blood eye. The blood eye was filled with bloodlust. Then the blood eye expanded. Its size was not smaller than the purple sword. In the blood eye, an inextinguishable blood flame burned. The blood eye was suddenly surrounded by blood flame. Then, the blood flame spread in all directions. It had the power to burn the sky. Bang! The purple sword fell and slashed at the terrifying blood flame. The purple sword chi dissipated like splashing waves, overflowing in all directions. Wherever it passed, the blood flame automatically opened a bloody path. The violet sword followed the bloody path and slashed into the blood-red eye in the end. Afterwards, an extremely ear-piercing explosion rang out, and the explosions continued to ring out. Then, the area of millions of miles around the Blood God Palace was turned into ruins and nothingness when the blood eye and the purple sword collided. An invisible shockwave spread out from the direction of the Blood God Temple. It was extremely fast and arrived in the blink of an eye. The cultivators nearby all let out muffled groans and were knocked back. Some of the stronger cultivators used their own powerful defenses to block the terrifying shockwave. Even so, they were still in a sorry state from the shockwave. Tai Ching and Yu Qing stood closest to the battlefield. However, purple mist revolved around them, easily blocking the terrifying shockwaves from the collision. Tai Ching's gaze grew brighter and brighter. He stared fixedly at the descending terrifying purple sword, and a wisp of understanding appeared in his eyes. Even though this strand of 9th level Dao insight that Zhuowen pushed forward with his cultivation at the peak of the 8th level Dao insight wasn't much, yet to the Sky Dao insight, it was like being enlightened, and it was easy to understand. In countless years, this was the first time Tai Ching had revealed such an expression of understanding. He'd been stuck at the peak of the 8th level Dao insight for too long. He'd accumulated enough since a long time ago, but he still seemed to be lacking something. He was very clearly aware that he lacked an opportunity to comprehend. This instant was the opportunity and comprehension that he'd always needed. Zhuan stood on the hilt of the violet sword. His gaze descended onto the sword beneath his feet, and he noticed it had started to disperse. There was only a strand of 9th level Dao insight, and it was like a flash in the pan. He was clearly aware that this strand of energy wouldn't be able to persist for too long. However, after this sort of collapse spread from the tip of the violet sword to the hilt, it started to disperse beneath Zhuowen's feet, and then it started to disperse along with his body. At this moment, Zhuowen's entire body was covered in countless cracks, and he was like a shattered porcelain bottle that would shatter and collapse at any moment. Zhuowen knew that his time was up. When he thought up to here, Zhuowen's gaze descended onto Taiqing through the countless bloody flames. Taiqing looked silently at Zhuowen as well. Their gazes met, and then Taiqing nodded lightly while Zhuowen nodded lightly as well. Bang! In the end, Zhuowen's entire body completely dispersed into countless specks of light, and he vanished within the blazing bloody flames. At the instant he vanished, the violet sword that had originally dispersed suddenly condensed once more. The violet sword seemed to have been reborn, and it contained an extremely terrifying aura since the ancient times. After that, the violet sword suddenly exploded, and the terrifying bloody flames in the surroundings were completely obliterated. On the other hand, the bloody eye that emitted the bloody flames let out a sharp howl before directly exploding. Crack! The bloody eye exploded, and the bloody hand that had been protecting the rest of the blood protectors also exploded. The blood scholar and the remaining blood protectors under the bloody hand all screamed as they exploded into clouds of bloody mist. As for the majestic blood god temple, it completely collapsed under this terrifying power. As for the blood-red face that the blood god had transformed into, it was destroyed without any warning. After the bloody face dissipated, a muffled groan came from the depths of the blood divine temple. Then, a stalwart man in blood-red armor suddenly rushed out of the ground and quickly left the vicinity of the blood divine temple. Bang! The violet sword was like a pillar that supported the heavens as it pierced into the center of the collapsed blood divine temple. It was like a purple heavenly pillar that connected the heavens and the earth. How terrifying! The blood divine temple was destroyed just like that. At this moment, the surroundings were completely silent. Countless spectating cultivators widened their eyes as they stared fixedly at the huge violet sword that was pierced into the blood divine temple. This scene was deeply imprinted in everyone's minds. It would probably be deeply imprinted in their minds for many years to come. It would be unforgettable. And this violet sword would become a great sight in the future. It stood at the old site of the blood divine temple and had not dissipated for countless years. In the future, whenever someone came to the old site of the blood divine temple, they would talk about the battle that had taken place in the blood divine temple. The second disciple of the Grand Pure One, Zhuan, had charged into the blood divine temple alone and killed countless assassins. He had annihilated the 10 blood protectors and even forced the blood god to leave his seclusion in the depths of the blood divine temple. This battle was destined to be recorded in the annals of the Grand Pure One immortal realm. The blood god landed outside the vicinity of the blood divine temple. His eyes were filled with shock and anger. The blood divine temple had been destroyed and all the assassins trained inside had been killed. That was not all. The 10 core blood protectors of the blood divine temple had almost all died. He was the only one left. Suddenly, the blood god's gaze fell on a piece of soil not far from the blood divine temple. There, he stretched out a hand with difficulty. Chapter 1911. This rebirth, the person who emerged from the ground was none other than Xue Jian, who had been drowned by the terrifying purple wave. Xue Jian's breathing was ragged, and his face was pale. Only the hilt remained of the blood-red sword in his right hand. That was close. If I hadn't reached the second step of the illusory bridge and gained the undying body, I probably would have died. Xue Jian's eyes were filled with fear. After being drowned by the purple wave, his body had collapsed. Even his soul and illusory bridge had been destroyed. Fortunately, the moment his entire body collapsed, he hid a drop of blood in his body into the soil below. Even though his soul and illusory heavenly bridge had been destroyed, after cultivating to the undying realm, as long as one drop of blood remained, he could use this drop of blood to reconstruct his life. However, the price of reconstructing his life was extremely high. The strength of the reconstructed life would be greatly reduced. It would take a large amount of time and resources to recover. Xue Jian was extremely weak right now. His face was as pale as snow, and his presence was much weaker than before. At this moment, Xue Jian also noticed that a terrifying purple sword had been stabbed into the ground where the Blood Divine Hall had been. The Blood Divine Hall had been reduced to ruins in the surrounding hundreds of thousands of miles. There was no one there. Xue Jian seemed to think of something. His expression changed drastically as he muttered to himself, "The Blood Divine Hall disappeared? It was destroyed?" Although Xue Jian's words were doubtful, he understood that his guess was correct. It had been destroyed by the purple sword behind him. What kind of monster is that Zhuowen? How can he have such terrifying power? Xue Jian immediately thought of Zhuowen when he saw the terrifying purple sword. After all, the purple sword contained Zhuowen's presence. Hall Master, a surge of blood-red energy wrapped around Xue Jian. Then Xue Jian felt his body lighten, and he shot toward the blood god. Xue Jian hurriedly bowed when he arrived before the blood god. He knew that the blood god had always been in seclusion in the Blood Divine Hall. There was only one possibility for him to come out now, and that was that the purple sword had forced him out. "Let's go." The blood god looked at purple sword on the old site of the blood god temple with a complicated expression. He sighed and left with blood sword. Seeing Xue Shen and Xue Jian leave, everyone knew that only the two of them were left in the Blood God Hall. It could be said that the Blood God Hall existed in name only. However, the Blood God was the core of the Blood God Temple. As long as the Blood God was not dead, the Blood God Temple could rise again. However, after this lesson, the Divine Blood Hall would not be as arrogant and despotic as before. "Master, junior brother, really?" Lian Meng suddenly pulled on Tai Ching's sleeve, her eyes slightly red and tears swirling in her eyes, but she resisted the urge to cry, an indescribable grievance on her face. Grand Pure One's gaze was complicated as he sighed. "Lian Meng, your junior brother might not have gone. Perhaps we will have a chance to meet again?" Lian Meng did not understand what Grand Pure One meant. She was very clear that Zhuowen's vitality had been completely cut off. In other words, he had completely fallen. How could she meet with Zhuowen in the future? However, Lian Meng knew that Grand Pure One's words had a deeper meaning, and she trusted Grand Pure One greatly. She knew that Grand Pure One's words were not baseless. Lian Meng suddenly said, "Master, if what you said is true, I will cultivate properly from now on. Once I succeed, I want to go out for a walk." Looking at Lian Meng, Grand Pure One's lips were full of smiles as he said, "Since you have such intentions, Master can rest assured. However, going out for training is not just a matter of words. Master will only be at ease if you go out for training after 2 or more lightning disasters." Lian Meng did not say anything and only nodded seriously. Ever since she and Zhuowen had experienced the pursuit of the Blood Divine Temple's assassins, Lian Meng finally understood how lacking she was in terms of actual combat. At the same time, she became even more determined to become stronger. At the same time, Grand Pure One took a step forward slowly. He flashed before the violet sword and pointed out with his right hand. After that, he ceaselessly drew and inscribed on the surface of the violet sword, writing the words "Tomb of my beloved disciple." After doing all that, Grand Pure One and Jade Pure One brought Lian Meng away, leaving behind the crowd silently looking at the enormous purple sword. Bai Shuang stood beside Jing Hai and softly said, "Senior Sister Jing Hai, that Zhuowen's time is up. His vitality has been cut off just like that?" Jing Hai did not reply. She only looked at the purple sword with a complicated gaze before turning around and leaving. The aura of death on Zhuowen's body was too obvious. As long as one was a heavenly god, one could tell that Zhuowen did not have much time left to live. Even though it was like this, when they saw Zhuowen perish just like this, It still caused many cultivators in the surroundings to sigh endlessly. After all, the strength that Zhuan had displayed was simply too terrifying. He was so young, and he had even eliminated the Blood Divine Temple with an extremely bad reputation. It was very satisfying. Afterwards, Zhuowen's name gradually spread through the Grand Pure Immortal Realm. In an instant, Zhuan had become a hero that everyone in the Grand Pure Immortal Realm knew about. The cold and lonely outer space had lost all life and was filled with emptiness. It was like a puddle of stagnant water. Deep within the outer space, at the bottom of an abandoned planet, a colossal beast lay silently. At this moment, the beast's eyes were closed as if it had fallen into a deep sleep. Deep within the beast's body, in the flesh wall near its stomach, the blood immortal slowly opened his eyes. His body was filled with powerful blood-red energy. The blood-red energy was like a cycle, swallowing and exhaling from his body, causing his aura to constantly strengthen during the process. The blood immortal let out a sigh of relief. His eyes shot out a blazing blood-red light as he laughed. The blood power in Devour's body is too powerful. It has only been half a year, and I have already reached the early true immortal realm. Now, my cultivation base is much stronger than Zhuo Wen's. After this guy is reborn into the spirit ring, his cultivation base will definitely be the same as before. He will only be at the late stage of the heaven immortal realm. At that time, he will be an ant compared to me. I only need to wave my hand to get rid of him. However, I am not an ungrateful person. Although this Zhuon tortured me for a long time, he also helped me break through a lot of realms. When he is reborn, I will let him recognize me as his master. I will let him live a good life and let him know that he did not follow the wrong master. The blood immortal couldn't help but imagine the scene of Zhuon recognizing him as his master. He revealed a wicked smile. But soon he noticed a fluctuation coming from the spirit ring on his hand. He was very familiar with this fluctuation. It was the fluctuation caused by the blood substitution pill. Zhuon has been reborn. This time I will let him know who is the real master. The blood immortal rubbed his hands and stared at the spirit ring, waiting for Zhuon to appear from the spirit ring. He was very clear that when Zhuon was reborn, the first thing he would do would be to come out of the spirit ring. From now on, I will wear this spirit ring. Zhuon will stay in the spirit ring. The blood immortal continued to tease him. At this moment, the fluctuation coming from the spirit ring slowly dissipated, and a white light lit up inside the spirit ring. Then a figure slowly appeared from the white light. It was a young man around 27 or 28 years old. Although his face was not handsome, it was very pleasing to the eye. At this moment, the young man's eyes had a touch of strange purple, and at the same time, there was a hint of confusion. I, the blood immortal, am here today. I will give you a chance. Now, you. The blood immortal cleared his throat, and the true immortal aura in his body suddenly burst out. He wanted to use his powerful aura to intimidate Zhuon. However, the moment the blood immortal's eyes met the purple light in Zhuowen's eyes, his face froze, and his whole body became sluggish. He could sense a destructive power within the purple intent. Especially when his gaze met Zhuo Wen's purple eyes. He noticed that he was like an insignificant ant in Zhuo Wen's purple eyes, and Zhuo Wen could destroy him with a wave of his hand. The blood immortal screamed and spat out a mouthful of blood. He retreated to the edge of the meat wall, and he was scared out of his wits. He pointed at Zhuon while trembling and couldn't say a word. Zhuon calmly looked at the blood immortal in front of him, and the purple light in his eyes gradually receded. This wisp of violet light was the concept that had attached itself to his eyes when he'd captured a strand of 9th level Dao insight. Because he'd just been reborn, even though he'd left the 9th level Dao insight within the sky immortal realm, this wisp of violet light that remained within his eyes hadn't had the time to disperse. Now that Zhuon came back to his senses, the purple light in his eyes also disappeared. Give you what? Zhuon didn't care about the blood immortal's arrogant attitude, and his voice was a bit cold as he asked. The blood immortal's body trembled. He would never forget the moment when Zhuon was reborn, and the purple light that was emitted from his eyes. That purple light was too mysterious and too powerful. The moment the blood immortal saw the purple light, he subconsciously wanted to escape and didn't think of resisting. Thinking of the terror of the purple light, the blood immortal didn't dare to have any ideas about Zhuan. He quickly smiled and said, "Master, you're finally back. You don't know how lonely I've been here for almost a year. Because of this, I've always hoped that Master could come back quickly. I know that with Master's wisdom, martial prowess, and unparalleled talent and strength, you'll definitely be able to bring me out of this sea of suffering. Now that Master is back, I'm so happy," Yuan immediately interrupted the blood immortal. From the change in the blood immortal's attitude, how could he not see that the blood immortal was frightened by the purple light that hadn't faded from his eyes? And he was also surprised to find that the blood immortal's cultivation had increased to the early stage of the true immortal realm after not seeing her for more than a year. The cultivation speed was so fast that it was beyond Zhuowen's expectation. However, after Zhuowen sensed the powerful blood power that spread from the meat wall around him, the surprise in his heart calmed down a lot. Chapter 1912. Cultivating the godly soul. Zhuowen looked around and found that he was surrounded by blood-red flesh walls. Below the flesh walls was a huge oval-shaped hole. The hole was filled with dark green acid. Without guessing, Zhuowen knew that below the flesh walls was the stomach of the infant devourer. Zhuowen frowned. He found that the blood power inside the infant devourer was very dense. The blood power had a strong corrosive power. He had just been reborn, so he was not used to it. Thinking of this, Zhuowen stomped his right foot. Immediately, the underworld water droplets burst out from his body and gathered into a terrifying yellow river that surrounded Zhuowen. The slaughtering finger of the underworld had been upgraded to a superpower. Its power was much stronger than before. Although Zhuowen's reborn body was only at the later stage of the sky immortal realm, the slaughtering finger of the underworld was his natal skill. Naturally, he could use it. With the underworld river surrounding him, Zhuowen was able to resist the strong corrosive power of the blood power around him. "Give me the spiritual ring." Zhuowen turned around and looked at the blood immortal at the edge of the flesh walls. She was scared. The blood immortal was scared out of her wits. Now that she heard Zhuowen's order, her body trembled. She quickly passed the spiritual ring to Zhuowen and said with a flattering smile, "Master, I knew that Master would be reborn, so I have been taking good care of the spiritual ring. I have never left it." The blood immortal's words were automatically ignored by Zhuowen. After he took the spiritual ring, he immediately checked Mu Chenxue in the spiritual ring. He found that Mu Chenxue was still quietly lying in the ice coffin. Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief. The price of this rebirth is quite high. After putting away the spiritual ring, Zhuowen found that he was only reborn as his original body. As for the demigod body and the mind avatar, they were all gone. He couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, Zhuowen still remembered the 5 void heaven-grade divine abilities from the scripture pavilion in the grand pure immortal realm, and the heaven-devouring eye was still growing on his forehead. It wasn't just that. Zhuowen noticed that the energy of Tao insight still existed within his body, and it was even a 4th level Tao insight. Looks like this Tao insight has been tacitly acknowledged as a part of him. As for the 8th level Tao insight and the trace of 9th level Tao insight in the Grand Clarity Immortal Realm, it was naturally impossible for Zhuowen to possess it now. After all, the main reason his Tao insight had improved so quickly was because he'd absorbed the Tao insight crystal given by the Sky Tao insight. On the other hand, the Tao insight within the Tao insight crystal wasn't comprehended by Zhuowen, and it was given to Zhuowen by the Sky Tao insight crystal. It was an external object, and it was impossible for it to be brought back along with Zhuowen's rebirth. However, it was not like Zhuowen did not gain anything. Successively comprehending to the peak of the 8th level Tao insight and releasing a trace of 9th level Tao insight because of this allowed Zhuowen's understanding of Tao insights to obtain a systematic conclusion instead. Zhuowen knew extremely clearly that if he continued to comprehend and obtain gains in the energy of Tao insights in the future, then it would surely be much smoother than before. At least he knew the general direction of Tao insights, and he would surely not go astray in the aspect of comprehension. This was equivalent to Zhuowen having a shortcut to take on the path of Tao insights. This was like the path after the fourth level Dao insight was originally blurry and unclear, and Juan had to ceaselessly fumble about step by step. But Juan had now seen the end of the path and knew the general direction. Even though the process was still a ball of fog, at least Juan's following steps wouldn't deviate. He only needed to continuously advance in the correct direction, and he would eventually comprehend the 5th level, 6th level, and even 8th level Dao insights. As for the 9th level, Juan wasn't too sure. The 9th level Dao insight was truly too profound. Back then, when the trace of Purple Lake was condensed from all the Dao insights, Juan wasn't sure if it was the power of the 9th level Dao insight. But he was able to sense that there was an essential difference between that Dao insight and the peak of the 8th level Dao insight. Even if it wasn't, it should be extremely close to the 9th level Dao insight. Blood Immortal, why isn't there any movement from the infant devourer? Juan suddenly thought of something and asked the Blood Immortal, who wasn't far away. The Blood Immortal hurriedly said, "Master, actually I'm not sure either. Back then, this meat wall was extremely wriggling, but it suddenly stopped wriggling a year ago. Regarding this, I'm not very sure either." Juan nodded. He guessed in his heart that the infant devourer should have fallen into a deep slumber or was resting somewhere. If the infant devourer was really in a deep slumber, it would be a good thing for Juan. After all, when he wanted to possess the infant devourer, it would reduce a lot of obstacles. To possess the infant devourer, I must first condense my divine soul. Juan's eyes flickered. Back then, the divine soul wasn't cultivated by him, It was the Tsang Long Taoist who forcibly merged his divine soul into Juan's sea of consciousness. In fact, that divine soul was extremely flawed for Juan. Now that Juan was reborn, he naturally returned to the state before he became a divine realm expert, which was the cultivation of the later stage of the divine realm. Thinking of this, an extremely powerful purple intent appeared on Juan's body. Then, the yellow spring river that was originally surrounding him suddenly became turbulent. At this moment, Juan used the 4th level Dao insight. The Blood Immortal also felt the purple intent that suddenly swept out from Juan's body. She immediately retreated to the edge of the flesh wall in fear. She still remembered the purple intent that flashed out from Juan's eyes when he was reborn. She didn't want to experience that feeling of destruction a second time. However, what surprised the Blood Immortal was that the purple intent that Juan released this time was much weaker than before. However, it still had the aura of Dao insight. The reason why Juan did this was naturally to guard against the Blood Immortal. He had seen all of the Blood Immortal's actions after his rebirth. He knew that she was born to be rebellious. Once he didn't guard against her, there would be trouble in the future. After doing this, Juan took out a talisman that emitted a 7-colored light from the spiritual ring. This was the primordial talisman. When Juan became a divine realm expert, he knew that the primordial talisman wouldn't be of much use to him. Therefore, he put it in the spiritual ring. The primordial talisman has already collected 8 types of saint talisman. I only need the divination saint talisman to become a divine talisman. Perhaps I can rely on the divine talisman and the stars meditation diagram to transform my sea of consciousness into a divine soul. Thinking of this, Juan flicked his finger. Then, a figure was taken out from the spiritual ring. It was a petite Lolita. However, this Lolita's eyes were closed. She should be blind. She was the holder of the divination saint talisman, Yen Tianwei. Back then, the situation was urgent. Although he caught Yen Tianwei, Juan didn't search her. Yen Tianwei, this time I will give you another chance. Hand over the divination saint talisman. After this, I, Juan, promise you that I will change your physique. Juan said in a deep voice. Yen Tianwei's body trembled. Then, she sneered and said, I don't believe that you can do what Yang Yi couldn't do. The cost of changing your physique is too great. I don't believe that you can do it. Juan sneered and said, Since you don't believe me, I just need to search your soul. Whether you lose your mind or not is none of my business. Hearing this, Yen Tianwei's face changed greatly. She had been in the spiritual ring for nearly a year and had already calmed down. Although the divination saint talisman was important, her life was more important. What was even more strange was that she couldn't divine anything about Juan. In addition, Yun appeared in front of her. She also guessed that Yang Yi and the Divine Realm expert had failed. Wait, I will hand over the Divination Saint Talisman. However, you must keep your promise. Yen Tianwei said in a deep voice. Yun nodded and said, Yun will definitely do what I say. Hearing this, Yen Tianwei didn't waste any time. She tapped between her eyebrows. Then, Zhuan discovered that there was an extremely obscure pattern between her eyebrows. Yen Tianwei tapped with her right hand and the pattern collapsed with a bang. Then, Zhuan clearly felt the aura of the Divination Saint Talisman coming from Yen Tianwei's Sea of Consciousness. It seems that the Divination Saint Talisman has always existed in Yen Tianwei's Sea of Consciousness. However, she used some method to seal its aura. That's why I didn't detect the Divination Saint Talisman in her Sea of Consciousness. Zhuan pondered. After a while, Yen Tianwei tapped between her eyebrows with her right hand and took out a gray talisman. Here. Yen Tianwei handed the Divination Saint Talisman to Zhuan. After receiving the Divination Saint Talisman, Zhuan cupped his fists at Yen Tianwei and said, Don't worry, Miss Yen. I will do what I say. However, this will have to wait until I absorb this divine talisman. Yen Tianwei heaved a sigh of relief. She was most afraid that Zhuan would kill her after she took out the divine talisman. However, it seemed that her worries were unnecessary. Since you want to absorb the divine talisman, I will not disturb your cultivation. I will enter the spirit ring first. Yen Tianwei was also very smart. She knew that Zhuan wanted to cultivate, so she took the initiative to enter the spirit ring. After Yen Tianwei entered the spirit ring, Yuan integrated the Divination Saint Talisman into the primordial talisman. Suddenly, the origin energy in the primordial talisman surged. Then, the primordial talisman collapsed. The origin energy in it began to entangle and eventually formed a white ball. What a pure origin energy! If I absorb this origin energy, it will completely transform my sea of consciousness. Thinking of this, Zhuan pointed at the white ball with his right hand. Then, strands of thin white silk began to flow from the white ball into the depths of Zhuan's brow and into his sea of consciousness. At the same time, Zhuan began to operate the stars meditation diagram. He began to use this abhijna with the origin energy to transform his sea of consciousness into a godly soul. Time passed slowly. Zhuan had been cultivating here for 3 whole years. Outside the Yellow Spring River, the blood immortal sat cross-legged in the flesh wall. She occasionally looked at the Yellow Spring River and wondered why Zhuan hadn't come out yet. At the same time, she was very wary of the purple aura that lingered in the Yellow Spring River. The blood immortal had a once bitten, twice shy mentality. Even though the purple aura was far less terrifying than the purple aura that came out of Zhuan's eyes, she still didn't dare to get close to Zhuan. Suddenly, the yellow spring water droplets collapsed and revealed the figure of Zhuan, who was sitting cross-legged. At this moment, Zhuan's eyes slowly opened. His eyes emitted a dazzling divine light. Chapter 1913. Possession. In the past 3 years, the blood immortal had the support of the power of blood, so her cultivation speed was not slow. She had already reached the late stage of the true immortal realm. Because she was in the body of the infant devourer, the heavenly Tao could not find her when she leveled up, so there was no tribulation lightning. As the blood immortal's cultivation continued to improve, she naturally had some understanding of the soul formation stage. When Zhuan's eyes shone with divine light, the blood immortal immediately sensed the tremendous changes in Zhuan's sea of consciousness. It could be said that Zhuan's sea of consciousness could no longer be called sea of consciousness, but divine soul. So fast? Zhuan's progress is too fast, isn't it? His sea of consciousness transformed into divine soul. The blood immortal was dumbfounded as she muttered to herself. After all, 3 years ago, Zhuan's sea of consciousness was only at the late stage of the sky immortal realm. She could not understand how Zhuan managed to transform his sea of consciousness into divine soul in just 3 years. If the blood immortal knew that Zhuan had the divine talisman, which was used in conjunction with the void sky level meditation star diagram, she would not be so surprised. The divine talisman contained the power of origin, which had a great chance of transforming the sea of consciousness into divine soul. The meditation star diagram was a void sky level meditation star diagram that could temper the divine soul. With the combination of the two, it would be strange if Zhuowen still could not transform his sea of consciousness into divine soul in 3 years. Of course, Zhuowen only transformed his sea of consciousness into divine soul. As for his own cultivation, he had reached the peak of the sky immortal realm. Moreover, Zhuowen found that after cultivating the meditation star diagram, his divine soul was much stronger than the divine soul that the Tsang dragon Taoist merged into his body. Looking into Zhuowen's divine soul, one could find that Zhuowen's divine soul space was very similar to the starry sky. However, there were no stars in his spiritual space. Instead, there was only darkness. In this darkness, there was only one star that silently bloomed and flickered by itself. Zhuowen knew very well that as he continued to cultivate the myriad star meditation diagram, numerous flourishing stars would surely be born within his soul space, and in the end, it would transform into a galaxy and form a starry sky. At this moment, Zhuowen finally understood how precious the celestial star meditation diagram was. Just condensing a single star in the spiritual space would make one's soul much more powerful than an early god. Zhuowen found it hard to imagine how powerful his spirit would be if his spiritual space became a boundless starry sky. As expected of Master, you've actually achieved the divine soul realm so quickly. It seems that Master is not far from becoming an enlightened master. I, Little Blood, congratulate Master on achieving great success in the divine skill. The Blood Immortal was good at observing people's expressions. He also noticed that Zhuowen's spirit was more powerful than the Tsang Long Taoist, so he could not help but flatter him. Zhuowen glanced at the Blood Immortal indifferently and said in a low voice, "Blood Immortal, how much do you know about the structure of the infant devourer's body?" The Blood Immortal was stunned. Although he did not know why Zhuowen asked this question, he answered honestly, "Master, I only walked around the infant devourer's stomach area. I never dared to go anywhere else." Zhuowen frowned slightly. Soon after, he said in a cold voice, "Follow me for a walk up there." Zhuowen pointed to the top of the meat wall. Above was the infant devourer's esophagus. Zhuowen planned to follow the esophagus and get close to its head. Then he would use his powerful spirit to slowly penetrate into the infant devourer's sea of consciousness and possess it. Of course, possession was an extremely dangerous method. Before doing so, one naturally had to carefully observe the infant devourer's sea of consciousness. However, this place was the infant devourer's stomach, which was too far away from the infant devourer's sea of consciousness. Even though Zhuowen's spirit was powerful, it was obviously unrealistic to observe the infant devourer's sea of consciousness from here. The Blood Immortal's face turned bitter. He stuttered, "Master, the infant devourer's body is full of dangers. Aren't we walking into a trap?" Zhuowen coldly glanced at the Blood Immortal and said, "So, you're going to stay in the infant devourer's body until your lifespan ends? I can tell you now that the reason we're safe and sound is because the infant devourer has fallen into a deep slumber. Once the infant devourer wakes up, it means that there's a possibility that we'll be discovered by it. At that time, we'll truly be unable to escape." The Blood Immortal was startled and immediately understood Zhuowen's meaning. He also knew that it was not appropriate to stay in the infant devourer's body, but he could not make up his mind. "Master, I'll listen to you." The Blood Immortal gritted his teeth. He would definitely follow Zhuowen. He had followed Zhuowen for a long time, so he knew that Zhuowen would not do things that he was not sure of. Zhuowen nodded, then looked at the esophagus above the meat wall and said, "The blood power above is extremely dense. It's too much for me. You take me to the infant devourer's mouth." The reason why Zhuowen wanted the Blood Immortal to go with him was not because he was kind. It was because the blood power in the esophagus was too strong. Although Zhuowen's spirit was powerful, his cultivation base was not high enough. The blood power had little effect on the Blood Immortal. Thus, Zhuowen could only rely on the Blood Immortal. The Blood Immortal did not hesitate. She bent down and said, "Master, come up. If the infant devourer is really sleeping, I can take you into its mouth. It's not a problem. Zhuowen rode on top of the Blood Immortal. Then, the Blood Immortal took a step back and a bloody light burst out from her body, wrapping around Zhuowen. Then, like an arrow leaving the bow, Zhuowen shot upwards. In the esophagus, as the Blood Immortal kept ascending, Zhuowen found that the blood power around him was getting more and more terrifying. It was almost beyond the range that Zhuowen could bear. Zhuowen knew clearly that if he did not rely on the Blood Immortal, he would not be able to go far in the esophagus. But the Blood Immortal did not reject the blood power around her. Instead, she seemed to enjoy it. Apparently, the blood power was helpful to her. About half a day later, the Blood Immortal took Zhuowen to the Infant Devourer's mouth. Getting off the Blood Immortal, Zhuowen slightly frowned. He could only feel a foul stench coming from the mouth. However, Zhuowen immediately cut off the feeling in his nose. Then, he went to a tooth and sat down cross-legged. Once again, he activated the slaughter finger of Acheron and the fourth-level Tao Will, forming a defense around his body. At the same time, Zhuowen's God's soul slowly came out. It went into the Infant Devourer's mouth and into the depths of its brain. The Blood Immortal was bored. Finally, she sat on the other side and started to absorb the blood power here to continue her cultivation. Zhuowen sat like that for 2 months. During these 2 months, he had been observing the Infant Devourer's Sea of Consciousness. He found that although the Infant Devourer's Sea of Consciousness had not transformed into a God soul, its Sea of Consciousness was much larger than that of an ordinary cultivator. Zhuowen suspected that the Infant Devourer's Sea of Consciousness was not weaker than the God soul of an early heavenly God. It's still not the right time to seize its body. I'm afraid that I need to learn the illusory technique of the shapeless all-life. It will be much more helpful for me to seize its body. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. In the end, he did not act rashly. After retrieving his God soul, Zhuowen started to look for the cultivation method of the shapeless all-life in his memory. The shapeless all-life did not have a specific division. If it had to be divided, it could be divided into 4 levels, which were the beginner level, the experienced level, the expert level, and the profound level. Now, Zhuowen only needed to cultivate to the beginner level and perform the illusory technique of the shapeless all-life. Together with his powerful God soul, Zhuowen was 80% sure that he could seize the Infant Devourer's body completely. Zhuowen was clear that once he succeeded in seizing the Infant Devourer's body, he would be able to possess the body of the strongest race in the starry sky. Not to mention the innate abilities of Devourer's body, Zhuowen knew that all his efforts would be worth it. It should be noted that when Devourer was controlled by its master, it had attacked the Infant Devourer. Although the Infant Devourer was blown away, its powerful body did not cause any damage to it. Moreover, Zhuowen's heaven-devouring eye had the complete energy of its master, which was absorbed by Devourer from the adult Devourer. It was stored in the heaven-devouring eye. Once he succeeded in seizing the Infant Devourer's body and absorbing the adult Devourer's energy in the heaven-devouring eye, he knew that it wouldn't be a problem for the Infant Devourer to advance to the heavenly God realm. After calming himself down, Zhuowen regained his composure. He began to cultivate the formless of all life. He planned to cultivate it to the entry level first. After another 3 months, Zhuowen finally cultivated the all-life formless to the entry level. He could use a rather powerful illusion technique, and with his current powerful divine soul, it was not a big problem for him to use an illusion technique in the middle stage or even the late stage of the psychedelic god. After everything was ready, Zhuowen's God soul left his body, slowly entering the Infant Devourer's Sea of Consciousness. The Infant Devourer's Sea of Consciousness was a golden sea with rolling waves. On the surface of the Sea of Consciousness, a giant beast with 12 horns on its head was coiled up. Its eyes were closed, as if it had fallen into a deep sleep. Zhuowen looked at the giant beast in silence. He knew that it was the Infant Devourer's soul. As long as he destroyed the Infant Devourer's soul, he would be able to occupy the Infant Devourer's Sea of Consciousness. Refining it was just a matter of time. Zhuowen slowly approached. When he was dozens of meters away from the Infant Devourer, the Infant Devourer suddenly opened its eyes. The Infant Devourer's eyes were filled with ferocious flames, as if it could swallow Zhuowen at any moment. However, Zhuowen didn't panic. At the moment Devour opened his eyes, spirals shot out from his eyes like a kaleidoscope with no end and no end. The infant Devour's body stiffened. It seemed to see the adult Devour, as well as the enormous energy in its body, waiting for it to absorb. The infant Devour couldn't help but cry out excitedly. Then, it pounced on the adult Devour. However, when the infant Devour reached the adult Devour, a palm suddenly appeared in front of its eyes. Then, the palm turned into a finger sword, with a strange purple aura hovering around its tip. Chapter 1914. Refining the infant Devour sensed the threat of death. Its eyes became clear, but at the same time, they were filled with fear. All of a sudden, Devour roared, soaring to the sky. Powerful sound waves spread out like ripples. Jun, who had his right finger on Devour's forehead, bore the brunt of the sound waves. Under the influence of the sound waves, Zhuowen's god's soul trembled violently. This beast isn't simple. It can still make such a terrifying roar even when it's about to die. Zhuowen's pupils shrank. The purple light on his right finger thickened. At the same time, he released the star in his god soul. Boom! The massive star smashed heavily on Devour's body, pounding it to the ground. Devour had been bewitched by Zhuowen's illusory technique. Moreover, Nguyen had hit its forehead with his finger, causing it to be severely injured. Now, with such a massive star pressing down on its body, Devour's soul became extremely dim, as if it would vanish at any moment. Looking at this scene, Zhuowen's eyes brightened. He continued to use the illusory technique of the shapeless world to influence Devour's soul. At the same time, he used his powerful god soul to control the star to bombard Devour's soul. However, Devour wasn't an ordinary being. Although Zhuon had attacked it and severely injured its soul, it was still standing strong. Devour roared angrily. Its dim soul suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light. At the same time, the golden sea of consciousness boiled up, raising a terrifying tsunami that instantly swept Devour and Zhuowen to the bottom of the golden sea. Within the golden seawater, Zhuowen's body swayed. The violent water pressure squeezed his soul, causing him to feel extreme pain. It was as if his soul was about to explode. Zhuowen cursed inwardly. Devour's counterattack before its death was so terrifying. At the beginning, Shi Yen had used many tricks to kill Devour in one strike. However, he hadn't expected that not only would he fail to destroy Devour's soul, but he would also be caught red-handed. Crush! The water pressure of the golden seawater was very terrifying. It squeezed Zhuowen's divine soul, causing Zhuowen's divine soul to feel a piercing pain. Damn it! Zhuowen knew that this was a moment of life and death. If he didn't kill the young Devour's soul and let it drag him into the depths of the golden sea, he would die without a doubt. Explode! As a last resort, Zhuowen had no choice but to detonate the stars that he had painstakingly cultivated from the star's meditation diagram. After the stars that were pressing down on Soul Devour's infant body exploded, the tremendous energy shrouded Soul Devour. The young Devour didn't even have time to react before his soul exploded into pieces. On the other hand, Zhuowen's spirit became extremely dim, like an illusory shadow that could disappear at any moment. That star was Zhuowen's foundation. Now that Zhuowen had detonated it, Zhuowen's divine soul was severely damaged. However, Zhuowen knew that if he could successfully destroy Devour's soul, everything he had done would be worth it. At this moment, Zhuowen's spirit had already broken free from the young Devour's shackles. Zhuowen retreated dozens of meters, looking at the young Devour's soul that was shrouded by the exploding stars. His eyes were as calm as water. The infant Devour's soul was becoming more and more illusory. Then, it shattered into numerous fragments. However, when Devour's soul shattered into countless fragments and was about to be annihilated, a golden chain suddenly shot out from between his eyebrows. The golden chain was extremely fast. In an instant, it wrapped around Zhuowen's spirit and tightened. After releasing the golden chain, the young Devour's soul completely dissipated. All that was left was an extremely unwilling roar that continuously reverberated within the golden seawater. Zhuowen's eyes were gloomy. At this moment, he was bound by the golden chain and couldn't move at all. He kept sinking into the depths of the Golden Sea. The Golden Sea was Devour's spirit sea. Zhuan didn't know how deep the Golden Sea was, but he bitterly discovered that the pressure around the Golden Sea was becoming more and more terrifying. He was very clear that when he sank to a certain depth, the powerful pressure was enough to make his soul vanish into thin air. I was too careless. I didn't expect that Devour would use such a trick at the last moment. It wants to perish together with me. Zhuowen furrowed his brows and said unwillingly, I can't just sit and wait for death. Since the Golden Sea's pressure is stronger the deeper I go, as long as my spirit becomes stronger, it won't be a big problem. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with determination. He then released his fourth-level Dao intent and the space-time force from the Heaven Devourer Eye. With the support of the fourth-level Dao intent, the space-time force's power increased greatly, and it slowed down Zhuowen's sinking speed. Although Zhuowen wanted to break free from the golden chain, it was formed from the essence of Devour's spirit sea. With the current strength of Zhuowen's spirit sea, it was still difficult for him to break free. Let's cultivate my spirit sea first. After struggling a few times and discovering that he couldn't break free from the golden chain, Zhuowen sighed softly and began to cultivate the celestial star meditation diagram in silence. The moment he circulated the celestial star meditation diagram, Zhuowen discovered that the celestial star meditation diagram circulated at an extremely fast speed. Zhuowen quickly figured out the reason. The surrounding Golden Sea was Devour's spirit sea. The water pressure inside wasn't acting on Zhuowen's body, but on his spirit sea. As the water pressure continued to press on his spirit, Zhuowen's spirit sea circulated at an extremely fast speed to resist the water pressure. This was also the reason why he felt it was much faster than usual when he cultivated the celestial star meditation diagram. It could be said that the pressure of the spirit sea had stimulated the potential of Zhuowen's spirit sea. Thinking of this benefit, Zhuowen was delighted and hurriedly focused on tempering his spirit sea. He knew very well that as long as his spirit sea recovered, he should be able to break free from the golden chain. Time flew by. Zhuowen had already been in the Golden Sea for 10 years. During these 10 years, Zhuowen had almost sunk to the bottom of the Golden Sea, and his spirit sea had actually recovered 9 years ago. However, when Zhuowen's spirit sea recovered, he bitterly smiled as he discovered that he was still unable to break free from the golden chain on his body. As a result, Zhuowen could only continue to sink. Fortunately, the power of space and time slowed him down, giving Zhuowen ample time to constantly strengthen his spirit sea and resist the impact of the water pressure in the deep sea. Over the past 10 years, Zhuowen had been constantly guarding against the impact of the deep sea's water pressure. Under such pressure, his spirit sea progressed very quickly. Not only did it recover to its original state, but it even rose to mid-heavenly god. At this moment, in the pitch-black space of Zhuowen's spirit sea, there was no longer just one shining star, but more than a dozen scattered stars. These stars constantly flickered, somewhat resembling a starry sky. However, there was still a huge gap between them and a true starry sky. Even so, Zhuowen could feel that although his spirit sea had advanced to mid-heavenly god, the power of his spirit sea was probably much stronger than other mid-heavenly gods of the same level. Break! Looking at the golden chain on his body, Zhuowen's gaze gradually turned cold. The dozen stars in his spirit sea suddenly revolved, and a terrifying spirit sea immediately surged out. At this moment, the impregnable golden chain began to loosen, and countless cracks appeared on its surface. Bang! With a soft sound, countless cracks appeared on the surface of the golden chain, and it finally broke into pieces. It's finally broken! Zhuowen let out a sigh of relief, and then slowly stood up. However, what Zhuowen did not notice was that the broken golden chain suddenly turned into a ray of golden light and surged into his spirit sea. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to control his spirit sea to resist the golden light, he discovered that the golden light had actually condensed into a golden star after entering his spirit sea. This golden star's aura was much stronger than the other stars around it. Zhuowen's spirit sea also underwent a sudden transformation due to the addition of this golden star. It actually rose from mid-heavenly god to late heavenly god. Not only that, Yuan also discovered that with the addition of this golden star, his spirit sea seemed to have an inexplicable sense of intimacy with the surrounding golden sea. This golden chain is the essence of the infant devourer soul. Originally, the infant devourer had planned to use this golden chain to kill me. Little did he expect that I would be the one to break it and obtain the golden chain to fuse with my spirit. I have the essence of the infant devourer's soul, so it won't be too difficult for me to refine his spirit sea. Zhuowen's eyes flickered, and with a stomp of his right foot, he rushed out of the bottom of the sea and swept into the sky above the golden sea. This spirit sea will be under my control from now on. Zhuowen looked around the vast golden sea, and then sat cross-legged in midair. The dozen stars in his spirit sea flew out one by one, and floated above the golden sea. Crush! The appearance of the stars was immediately rejected by the golden sea, but the moment the golden stars appeared, the surging golden sea immediately ceased. Moreover, Yuan also discovered that the golden sea below had turned into a golden stream and flowed into the golden stars. In a short while, the golden sea was completely absorbed, leaving behind a huge, bare pit. Zhuowen looked around the entire spirit sea and was slightly shocked. The size of the infant devourer's spirit sea was still beyond Zhuowen's imagination. This spirit sea was at least hundreds or thousands of times larger than a cultivator's, and it was almost boundless. Zhuowen patted his head and whispered with a wry smile, I don't know how long it will take to transform such a large spirit sea into a spirit sea, but I'll still give it a try. Thinking of this, Yuan swept over to the golden stars and began to transform the entire spirit sea with the surrounding stars' power. Of course, in the process of transformation, Zhuowen's spirit sea was constantly integrated into the spirit sea, hoping to completely merge his spirit sea with the spirit sea. Zhuowen had been sitting in the infant devourer's spirit sea for a total of 50 years. Including the previous 10 years, Zhuowen had been here for 60 years. At this moment, the blood immortal in the infant devourer's mouth could no longer sit still. It's been 60 years, and my cultivation has reached the demigod realm. Why hasn't Zhuowen done anything? The blood immortal stood up and walked straight to the slot where Zhuowen was. Chapter 1915. Done. At this moment, Zhuowen's tooth was still covered by the yellow spring river and the fourth level Dao meaning. The blood immortal could only vaguely see Zhuowen's figure sitting cross-legged inside. Looking at the purple intent from the fourth level Dao meaning, the blood immortal was still a bit scared. After hesitating for a while, the blood immortal snorted and said, I'm already a demigod, but Zhuowen's aura is still at the peak of the sky immortal realm. It seems that the purple intent in his eyes was just a trick. As she spoke, the blood immortal's right hand formed into a claw and suddenly tore. Then, a crackling sound came from her claw. The river of the underworld that had been strengthened by the fourth layer of Dao intent suddenly shook. Countless yellow water splashed out, but it didn't break. The blood immortal was surprised, but soon he didn't care. Originally, he was scared of the purple intent in the yellow spring river. The previous attack was just a test. After probing, he discovered that the power of the purple will was not as strong as he had imagined. His eyes immediately revealed a sharp glint. As expected, the purple will from before was just a trick. Watch me break through your defense. The blood immortal snorted and reached out his right claw again. A terrifying bloody light condensed in the center of his claw. The bloody light was spinning like a spiral. It was extremely fast and had the power to destroy everything, and it blasted on the yellow spring river. With a muffled boom, the yellow spring river shook, and then it was crushed by the bloody spiral, revealing Zhuowen who was sitting in the tooth. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were closed, and his aura was faintly discernible. He was like a candle in the wind that could be extinguished at any time. The blood immortal looked at this scene in surprise. He thought that after he broke the yellow spring river, Zhuowen would definitely attack in anger, and he was ready to defend at any time. However, after the yellow spring river was destroyed, Zhuowen didn't move at all, and his aura was faintly discernible as if he was about to die. What's wrong with Zhuowen? The blood immortal was even more surprised. Just as she was about to reach out with her right hand to touch Zhuowen, A gust of fishy wind suddenly came from the inside of the devouring body. Then, the blood immortal was involuntarily swept away by this fishy wind. What's going on? This fishy wind was too strong, and the blood immortal was swept away without any power to resist. Soon after, he discovered that Devour's mouth was wide open, and he was swept away by the fishy wind from Devour's mouth. Plop! The blood immortal sat on the ground. Then, he looked up and was frightened to find that the sleeping infant Devour had opened its eyes and was staring at him coldly. Looking at the young Devour's deep eyes, the blood immortal trembled. Although the blood immortal had reached the demigod level, there was still a huge gap between her and the young Devour. "Oh, Lord Devour, you're awake. I'm the blood immortal, the little one you accidentally swallowed. I know that you swallowed me for my own good. Since I stayed in your body for a while, my cultivation has improved rapidly." Having said that, the blood immortal immediately got down on both knees with a servile expression. Her face was full of flattery as she kept on praising Devour's brilliance and brilliance. She said all the praises she could think of in one breath. The young Devour's eyes were still cold, or it was not the young Devour's eyes, but Zhuowen's. In 50 years, Zhuowen had completely refined the young Devour's sea of consciousness, and he was only half a step away from transforming it into a god soul. If it were not for the blood immortal's little trick, Zhuowen would not have cared, and would have continued to transform the young Devour's sea of consciousness. Zhuowen knew clearly that once the young Devour's sea of consciousness transformed into a god soul, he would be able to absorb the young Devour's power in the eye of Heaven Devour, and smoothly advance to the heavenly god level. "You can shut up now. If you dare to touch Zhuowen again, I'll make sure you die without a burial place." A thunderous voice came out from Devour's mouth, bringing with it a horrible smell of blood. The blood immortal shivered, and hurriedly crouched on the ground, not daring to look at the young Devour. She was surprised that the young Devour would protect Zhuowen. "Get in." The young Devour continued. I'll get in immediately. Don't be angry, my lord." The blood immortal carefully nodded and bowed to the young Devour, and then entered his mouth. After entering his mouth, the blood immortal did not dare to touch Zhuowen again, and immediately returned to her previous position. Zhuowen's god soul silently glanced at the blood immortal, who had calmed down, and then ignored her. He began to use all of his strength to transform the young Devour's sea of consciousness into a god soul. One could say that the infant Devour's sea of consciousness was terrifyingly huge. It was many times more difficult to transform his sea of consciousness into a divine soul compared to a cultivator. However, Zhuowen also knew that once the young Devour's sea of consciousness transformed into a god soul, its god soul would be so vast that it would not be at the level of a peak heavenly god's god soul. It should be noted that the young Devour's god soul had just formed. According to the classification of cultivators, its god soul was only at the early heavenly god realm. Although it was only at the early heavenly god realm, its god soul was already comparable to a peak heavenly god realm cultivator. If the young Devour's god soul reached the middle heavenly god realm, its god soul would be so powerful that it could crush any heavenly god in the heavenly god realm. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart was filled with excitement. Now that he had successfully seized the body of the infant Devour's body would be Zhuowen's main body. With the body of such a powerful race, Zhuowen believed that he could crush anyone in the same realm in the 8 heavens. The young Devour had not yet matured, but it was already so terrifying. If it was allowed to develop and grow, Zhuowen could not imagine how terrifying it would be when it matured. Moreover, after possessing the young Devour, Zhuowen also received a part of the young Devour's memories. He knew that the young Devour had an extremely powerful innate divine ability. It was said that the innate divine ability was very powerful. However, in order to awaken the innate divine ability, one had to at least advance to the heavenly god realm. Back then, the young Devour was actually very unlucky. It did not inherit the energy of the adult Devour, nor did it awaken the innate divine ability. It could only rely on its powerful body and had very few means of attack. This also caused the young Devour's strength to not be particularly strong on the surface. In Devour's inherited memories, Zhuan discovered that the so-called innate divine abilities seemed to be extremely powerful. Therefore, he was extremely anxious to transform the young devourer's sea of consciousness into a god soul so that it could advance to the heavenly god realm as soon as possible and obtain the innate divine ability. At least for now, the first step was to transform the god soul. Thinking of this, Zhuan hastened to refine the young devourer's sea of consciousness. Spring came and flowers bloomed. Another 5 years passed. On this day, the young devourer's sea of consciousness had completely changed. At this moment, the young devourer's sea of consciousness no longer looked like a golden sea. Instead, it had turned into an illusory starry sky. At this moment, there were many stars scattered in the starry sky. These stars revolved around a dazzling golden star. Moreover, the number of stars in the starry sky was much more than at the beginning. Now, there were nearly 100 stars. There was no doubt that Zhuowen's god soul had transformed again after absorbing the young devourer's sea of consciousness. Whether in terms of strength or breadth, it was much stronger than before. According to Zhuowen's current estimation, his god soul was now comparable to the god soul of a peak heavenly god realm cultivator. Although my god soul is much stronger than other heavenly gods of the same realm, I know that with the capacity of my god soul, it will be difficult to advance. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curled into a wry smile. Looking at the expanded god soul space around him, he knew very well that if he didn't have any divine items to enhance his god soul, the time he would need to cultivate his god soul could be described as an ocean. I've finally solved the problem of my god soul. Now, the only thing left is star power. Thinking of star power, Yuan felt a headache coming on. The energy devourer needed was too enormous. The star power of an ordinary life-bearing planet was insignificant to devour. Moreover, in Devour's inherited memories, it mentioned that when Devour became a heavenly god, he wouldn't choose a life-bearing planet. Instead, he would choose a star that contained terrifying energy. Moreover, there wasn't only one star. He would need 9 stars arranged in a line. Only then would the star power of 9 stars be enough for Devour to reach the heavenly god realm. Sigh. I need a star. It seems that I have to enter the heaven domain to find a star. But before that, I have to change the appearance and aura of this infant Devour. Yuan muttered. His god soul had completely merged with the infant Devour's body. It could be said that the current Yuan was Devour, and the infant Devour was Yuan. Moreover, Yuan had the void heaven grade concealment divine ability, shapeless all life. This divine ability could change his appearance and aura at will. In the past 60 years, Yuan had cultivated shapeless all life to the 4th stage, the great success stage. It could be said that as long as he used shapeless all life, even an ordinary void heaven grade expert wouldn't be able to see through Zhuowen's true nature. Thinking of this, Zhuowen began to circulate shapeless all life. Then, the infant Devour's enormous body began to shrink until it was only the size of a human. At this moment, Zhuowen's entire body was wrapped in white light. Aya! The blood immortal, who was still in the infant Devour's mouth, had been kicked out when the infant Devourer shrank. At this moment, the blood immortal sat down on the ground again with anger on her face. However, when the blood immortal realized that the infant Devourer had disappeared, her body trembled and her eyes were filled with confusion. But soon, her eyes landed on the figure wrapped in white light. She sensed a remnant aura of the infant Devourer from the white light. However, this aura soon disappeared as if it didn't exist. When Zhuowen's appearance finally appeared in front of the blood immortal was even more confused. She could clearly feel that the current Zhuowen was different from before. Or perhaps, at this moment, Zhuowen actually gave him an extremely terrifying feeling of oppression. Chapter 1916. Guqin Mountain. The Zhuowen that appeared in front of the blood immortal was actually Zhuowen using the power of shapeless life to forcibly change the appearance of the infant Devourer into Zhuowen's face. Although the infant Devourer's body was huge, Zhuowen's god soul had already controlled the body, so he could change its size at will. Moreover, shapeless life could change the appearance, so it wasn't difficult to change the infant Devourer into Zhuowen's face. Moreover, Yuan knew that shapeless life wasn't absolute, and devour was too famous in the 8 heavens. Therefore, if he had the chance in the future, he had to find a secret method or divine item that could fool void sky experts. As for Zhuowen's original body, Yuan had placed it in Devour's internal space. Now that Zhuowen's god soul had merged with the infant Devour's body, it was difficult to separate. However, he could use a part of his god soul to control the body, but it wasn't much different from controlling a puppet. Therefore, Zhuon would rather not do that. The difference between the original body and the infant Devour's body was too big. For Zhuon, it was useless. Therefore, Zhuon only planned to seal it in his body. He didn't expect to use it in the future. Master, what about the infant Devour? The Blood Immortal looked around and asked. Yuan didn't pay attention to the Blood Immortal, but his eyes fell on the direction of the Huaxia heavenly region. When he went to the Taiqing Wonderland with Taiqing, he told the Long Xiaotian, Feng Shiyao, and other Ryuka higher-ups that Zhuon would come back. He also promised Moyan Wushang and Xiao He that he would come back. Therefore, before going to the Great Brahma heavenly region, Zhuon planned to go to the Long River Galaxy in the Huaxia heavenly region and take the new heavenly armor star away. Seeing that Zhuon didn't pay attention to her, the Blood Immortal couldn't help but be angry. She said coldly, I'm giving you face by calling you master. Now that I've become a demigod, I'm not far from becoming a god. Don't think you can act arrogant in front of me. Say that again? Zhuon collected his thoughts and coldly stared at the Blood Immortal. A bloodthirsty light flashed in his eyes. The Blood Immortal's face froze. Her eyes were filled with fear. She could feel the horrifying power from Zhuon. She had felt this power from the infant Devour. However, the Blood Immortal quickly came back to her senses. She sneered and said, "Trying to scare me? It's not that easy." As she spoke, the Blood Immortal took a step forward with her right foot and turned into a horrifying blood shadow that rushed toward Zhuon. The moment she got close to Zhuon, the Blood Immortal split into countless blood shadows. It was a dazzling sight. Zhuon sneered. He already knew that the Blood Immortal was dishonest. However, Zhuon didn't put the Blood Immortal in his eyes. Zhuon pointed with his right sword finger and used the sword-piercing thorns. Countless sword shadows condensed into ferocious thorns and instantly broke the countless blood shadows formed by the Blood Immortal. Bang! Under the effect of the sword-piercing thorns, the Blood Immortal was heavily smashed into the ground and fell flat on her face. The Blood Immortal was still in the position of falling flat on her face. Her mouth was wide open as she looked at the scene in shock. She never thought that Zhuowen's strength would suddenly become so horrifying. He defeated her in one move. But soon, the Blood Immortal reacted. He quickly gave a thumbs up and flattered, as expected of my master. I knew that my master was unparalleled. You defeated me in one move. You really are my role model. You are the person I admire my whole life. The Blood Immortal kept on blabbering. She said almost all the praises she could think of in one breath. She praised Zhuon to the skies. Zhuon didn't appreciate it at all. Instead, he took out the spiritual ring from his mouth and calmly put it on his right hand. He then looked at the Blood Immortal indifferently and said, "Go back to the spiritual ring." Master is right. Little Blood Disciple will scram back into the spirit ring. After the Blood Immortal went back to the spiritual ring, Zhuon placed a restriction on the spiritual ring to prevent the Blood Immortal from seeing the secret of him possessing the baby. This Blood Immortal is a disaster. It is not appropriate for her to follow me. After returning to the heavenly region of Huaxia, I will immediately give her back her freedom and ask her to leave. The Blood Immortal's personality was capricious. She was born to be rebellious. Zhuon didn't want her to follow him. Otherwise, she might become a hidden danger in the future. Let's go back to the Long River system first. This time, I still have to help Yan Tianwei improve his body constitution. It would be best if I could find 9 stars in the Long River system to obtain enough star power to become a sky god. Zhuon's eyes flashed. Since he had promised Yan Tianwei before, Zhuon naturally had to do it. Luckily, the indestructible heaven and earth that he cultivated had the miraculous effect of cleansing the marrow and meridians. However, if he wanted to cleanse the marrow and meridians of others, He had to cultivate the second level of the indestructible heaven and earth. The indestructible heaven and earth was a top-tier defensive body refining superpower. It was divided into 5 levels. They were postnatal, connate, qianjun, wanxiang, and indestructible heaven and earth. As long as Zhuan cultivated to the second level of connate, he would have the ability to cleanse the marrow and meridians of others. Of course, this cleansing target's cultivation must be below the sky god realm. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to succeed. Yan Tianwei was not a sky god realm cultivator. If Zhuan cultivated to the connate realm, he would naturally be able to cleanse her marrow and meridians. However, cultivating the indestructible heaven and earth required the qi of heaven and earth. This was what he saw when he was reading the Indestructible Heaven and Earth book. Zhuan had also heard about the qi of heaven and earth when he was in the Taiqing immortal realm. It was said that this was something that all sky god realm cultivators needed. This was because the qi of heaven and earth could reduce the pain during the cultivation process. However, the indestructible heaven and earth was different. Other cultivators needed the qi of heaven and earth to reduce the pain. However, the indestructible heaven and earth required a large amount of the qi of heaven and earth to quickly cultivate. The qi of heaven and earth was not particularly rare in the Huaxia heaven domain. Almost every galaxy had the qi of heaven and earth. However, the price was not low. Zhuan had also read about the qi of heaven and earth in the scripture pavilion. In addition, this thing was related to the indestructible heaven and earth. Therefore, Zhuan secretly remembered it in his heart. Therefore, when he returned to the Long River Galaxy this time, Zhuan planned to look for the qi of heaven and earth. Thinking of this, Zhuan took a step forward and immediately rushed out from the depths of the abandoned star. He broke out of the ground and instantly rushed into the starry sky. Zhuan's current body was the body of the infant devourer. Even if he did not use an astrolabe, he could still fly in the starry sky. Of course, this kind of flight consumed a lot of Zhuan's energy. Therefore, when he returned to the Long River Galaxy this time, he planned to get an astrolabe. As Zhuan had been to the Huaxia Heaven domain before, Zhuan was familiar with traveling through the starry sky. He followed his memory and flew in the direction of the Huaxia Heaven domain. The Long River Galaxy was located at the edge of the Huaxia Heaven domain. Even among the first-grade galaxies, it was considered to be at the bottom. However, ever since the Great Purity and Jade Purity had stayed in the Long River Galaxy, the Long River Galaxy became popular. Many true gods in the surrounding galaxies fought to send gifts to visit the ruler of the Long River Galaxy, Chi-Chi, in order to get close to him. The Great Purity and Jade Purity's position in the Huaxia Heaven domain was known to everyone. Even some powerful third-grade galaxies had not received the two existences, the Great Purity and Jade Purity. However, a small first-grade galaxy like the Long River Galaxy had received characters like the Great Purity and Jade Purity. This attracted the attention of other galaxies. Many true gods secretly guessed that Chi-Chi might have some relationship with the three pure ones. However, this guess was not reliable. However, the fact that the Great Purity and Jade Purity had stayed in the Long River Galaxy was undeniable. On the main planet of the Long River Galaxy, in a luxurious palace, Chi-Chi sat cross-legged in the hall. At this moment, the hall was filled with many gifts. These gifts were sent by the true gods in the nearby galaxies. There were some true gods that he could only look up to, such as the true gods of 2 calamities and 3 calamities. Thinking about those true gods who were more powerful than him, enthusiastically sending gifts and trying to get close to him, Chi-Chi felt very good. Although the arrival of Honorable Taiqing and Honorable Yuqing was due to Zhuowen, it's best that I don't tell anyone about it. Otherwise, the nearby real gods won't be as polite to me as they are now. Chi-Chi squinted his eyes. After tasting the benefits of this vanity, Chi-Chi naturally did not want to tell the specific reason why the Great Purity and Jade Purity had stayed in the Long River Galaxy. He just wanted to let the true gods guess. Although this is a little unfair to Zhuowen, I think he won't mind such an explanation. As long as I settle the people that Zhuowen brought here safely and without any mistakes, it'll be fine. In the beginning, Chi took good care of the people in the heavenly armor star, and he often went to check on the situation of the heavenly armor star. However, after hearing the news that Zhuan of the Great Purity Celestial Land had passed away, he was no longer so proactive. Even then, 60 years had passed and he had not visited the heavenly armor star even once. He had completely let the heavenly armor star develop. The people in the heavenly armor star had been entrusted to him by Zhuan. If Zhuan had not died, Chi might have still fulfilled his duty and visited the heavenly armor star frequently. However, since Zhuan was already dead, it meant that no one from the Taiqing celestial realm would visit the people from the heavenly armor star in the future. As a real god, Chi naturally wouldn't care about a bunch of weaklings who hadn't even become heaven gods, let alone take care of them. There was a planet at the edge of the Long River Galaxy far away. This planet was the new heavenly armor star that Zhuan had chosen back then. In the center of the new heavenly armor continent, there was a towering mountain. The shape of the mountain was like a guqin, and it was also an extremely famous site in the heavenly armor continent. The mountain was called Guqin Mountain. It was a mountain that had suddenly risen from the center of the continent to the sky 20 years ago. The reason for the Guqin Mountain's existence was mainly because of a woman. This woman was called Moyan Wusheng. 20 years ago, Moyan Wusheng, who was originally a demigod, had an epiphany and her sea of consciousness transformed into a godly soul. She also refined the heavenly armor star and became the owner of the heavenly armor star. The moment Moyan Wusheng transformed into a god, she used her supreme divine power to create the Guqin Mountain deep underground in the center of the continent as her place of seclusion. Chapter 1917. Pandawoosh. Suddenly, 3 streams of light came from the starry sky and finally arrived above the heavenly armor continent. The streams of light converged, revealing 3 people. The leader was a handsome man in a sky-blue robe. There was a smile on his lips like a spring breeze. Of the 2 people behind the handsome man, one was a tall middle-aged man with an extremely high nose bridge, and the other was an old man with white hair and beard. The middle-aged man cupped his hands respectfully to the handsome man and said in a deep voice, "Master, the woman was on this planet last time." The handsome man nodded. His eyes fell on the ancient Zither Mountain standing in the middle of the continent. He chuckled and said, "It seems that the lady really likes the ancient Zither. Not only is she beautiful, but she also plays the ancient Zither so well." As soon as the handsome man finished speaking, the sound of a zither came from the ancient Zither Mountain. The sound of the zither was crisp and clear. However, there was a trace of indescribable sadness in the sound of the zither. The handsome man stood quietly in the same place. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he listened to the sorrowful zither sound with rapt attention. After the music, the handsome man opened his eyes. He kicked his right foot and rushed to the top of the ancient Zither Mountain. He cupped his hands gracefully and said, "The lady is really extraordinary. The sound of the zither is like a spiritual being. I am Panda. I wonder if the lady can let me in for a chat?" As soon as the handsome man spoke, the smoke lingering around the ancient Zither Mountain suddenly rolled wantonly. Then, a giant beast rushed out of the smoke, opened its mouth and swallowed the handsome man. "Beast! How dare you!" The middle-aged man behind the handsome man shouted angrily. He stretched out his right hand, and a terrifying star god power formed a huge palm and slapped Luo Yenjing fiercely. Bang! Luo Yenjing was slapped away and smashed to the ground. However, he was not seriously injured. Obviously, the middle-aged man knew how to control his strength. Luo Yenjing bared his teeth and was about to pounce again when a voice stopped him. "Luo Yenjing, stop!" Luo Yenjing roared. In the end, he had to give up and landed back on the ancient Zither Mountain. At this moment, the smoke on the Guqin Mountain gradually dissipated, revealing a graceful figure. This beautiful figure was carrying a zither on her back. Due to the veil covering her face, it was impossible to clearly see her appearance. However, the eyebrows that were revealed a hint of sorrow, which imperceptibly added a different kind of charm to her. "How did you find this place?" Moyan Wusheng asked with a frown. The handsome man was extremely polite. A few days ago, this Pan happened to hear Miss Mo Yan's zither music in the Grace Pavilion of the main star. For a moment, this Pan was shocked, so he secretly remembered Miss Mo Yan's whereabouts. Moyen Wushang interrupted Panda and coldly said, "Are you following me?" The handsome man didn't mind and said, "Miss Mo Yan, you're wrong. I just like your zither music. I came here as a guest because I want Miss Mo Yan to play a solo for me, Panda. I hope Miss Mo Yan won't refuse." Moyen Wushang's pretty face changed slightly. She naturally knew how to play the song, but the meaning of this song was extraordinary. Not only did it represent beautiful love, but it also contained a passionate courtship. If it wasn't someone they liked, the player wouldn't play it casually to an outsider. However, this Panda actually wanted Moyen Wushang to play a solo for him. His meaning was extremely obvious. "Miss Mo Yan, my young master is a member of the Pan family in the Gold Sun Galaxy. He asked you to play the song because he thinks highly of you. Why don't you play a solo for my young master?" The old man, who hadn't spoken much, suddenly sneered. Moyen Wushang's pretty face was a little ugly. She naturally knew about the Pan family. It was said that the Pan family was the family of the Gold Sun Galaxy's ruler, Pantheon, and had great power in the Gold Sun Galaxy. Although the Gold Sun Galaxy was also a first-grade galaxy, its power was much deeper than the Long River Galaxy. The reason Panda had appeared in the Long River system was because he had followed Pantheon and the others to deliver a gift to Chi-Chi. However, Panda happened to be a cultured person and liked music. Therefore, he had gone to the main planet to enjoy music. He didn't expect that after hearing Moyen Wushang's zither music, he would praise it endlessly. He even developed a strong interest in Moyen Wushang. With Panda's power, it was easy for him to inquire about the remote heavenly armor planet where Moyen Wushang lived. "Could it be that you have some hidden troubles?" Panda saw Moyen Wushang's silence and frowned. Although Panda wasn't Pantheon's son, his background in the Pan family wasn't small. Most female cultivators who knew about his background would throw themselves at him, wishing they could become his woman. Originally, Panda thought that after he told her about his background, this woman from Moyen Wushang would be like the other female cultivators he had met before. She couldn't wait to play the phoenix seeking phoenix for him, and then have a night of pleasure with him. He didn't expect that Moyen Wushang would be so displeased. Moyen Wushang glanced at Panda and said in a deep voice, "Young Master Pan, please go back. I will only play this song for one person. A long time ago, Wushang played it once, so I will not play it a second time." Panda raised his eyebrows. He knew that Moyen Wushang had rejected him. However, he was more curious about the man who could make this woman wait for him so infatuatedly. "I gave you face, but you didn't want it. If you don't play today, don't blame me for being impolite." The old man's eyes narrowed into slits and his voice was extremely cold. Moyen Wushang glanced at the old man indifferently. Immediately after, he looked at Panda and said, "If young Master Pan is here to cause trouble, Wushang will accompany you. Even though Wushang may not be a match for you three, at least I won't let you destroy this place so easily." Panda waved his hand and smiled like a spring breeze. He said, "Since Miss Wushang has a sweetheart, then forgive me for disturbing you." As he spoke, Panda waved at the middle-aged man and the old man. Immediately, the three of them left the heavenly armor planet. After Panda and the other two left, Moyen Wushang stood at the top of the Guqin mountain and frowned. "Wushang, it's been hard on you. In order to provide enough resources for the heavenly armor planet, you have to go to the main planet to perform." Two figures appeared behind Moyen Wushang. They were a man and a woman. The man was handsome and valiant, and the woman was gentle and beautiful. These two were Zhuowen's parents, Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao. Moyen Wushang looked at the two behind her and quickly shook her head. She smiled and said, "Since I am now the god of the heavenly armor planet, I naturally have the responsibility to protect the heavenly armor planet." Feng Xiao sighed and said, "Since 60 years ago, when real god Chi-Chi stopped visiting the heavenly armor planet, a god appeared among the natives of the planet and took away all the spiritual stones and other resources from our continent. They even claimed that these resources were originally theirs. How abominable! This planet was given to us by real god Chi-Chi, and they agreed to it. How could they do such a thing? Feng Xiao gritted her teeth and her beautiful eyes were filled with anger. Long Xiaotian said helplessly, if the resources of the heavenly armor planet were not so scarce, Wushang would not have to work so hard to earn divine stones and use the energy of the divine stones to replenish the lost spiritual stones and resources of the continent. Moyan Wushang waved his hand and said, Uncle, Auntie, you don't have to say that. This is what I should do. If Sun were here, I'm afraid he would do the same. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao looked at each other and sighed. They became silent. More than 60 years had passed and Zhuan still had not returned. They were worried about Zhuan. They did not know what had happened to Zhuan in the Taiqing celestial realm. For more than 60 years, he had not come back to visit them. Zhuan did not tell them about the idea of reincarnation. He had only told Xiao He, who had become the weapon spirit of the blood-splattered 5 steps. Hence, everyone in the heavenly armor continent thought that Zhuan was still in the Taiqing celestial realm. Although Zhuan's story had spread far and wide in the Taiqing celestial realm, the Long River Galaxy was too far away from the Taiqing celestial realm. In the Long River Galaxy, only Chi-Chi and a few higher-ups knew about the Taiqing celestial realm. Moreover, Chi-Chi had deliberately concealed Zhuan's matter, so Moyan Wushang and the others did not know that Zhuan had fallen in the Taiqing celestial realm. Even if they knew that Zhuan had the blood substitution pill, they also knew that Zhuan's blood substitution pill had been swallowed by Devour. If Zhuan had fallen and been reborn, it would have pointed to disaster. Moreover, I can feel that after the continent was filled with God's stones, the immortal Qi permeating the air is not weaker than the previous continent. Moreover, spirit stone resources have begun to appear in every corner of the continent, which has unimaginable benefits for the cultivation of the continent's warriors. 3 days later, I will go to the main star again. After earning some God stones this time, it should be enough to make up for the lost resources of the continent. Moyan Wushang said softly. Feng Xiao frowned and said, Wushang, Panda lives on the main star. If you go to the main star again, will he pester you again? Moyan Wushang gently lifted his scattered hair and said with a smile, Aunt, don't worry. Wushang has a sense of propriety. Hearing Moyan Wushang's words, Feng Xiao and Long Xiaotian could not persuade him anymore. They just sighed in their hearts. 3 days later, Moyan Wushang rode the smoke whale and left the heavenly armor star. However, the moment Moyan Wushang left the heavenly armor star, in the starry sky far away from the heavenly armor star, 2 figures wriggled. These 2 figures were pitch black and almost merged with the surrounding starry sky. If one did not observe carefully, it would be difficult to detect their existence. Moyan Wushang has left. There is no God in the heavenly armor star now. Let's go back and report to the Lord. One of the black figures said. Then, starlight flickered under their feet and they disappeared. Chapter 1918. Snatch. There was another planet far away from celestial armor planet. More than 80% of the planet was a wasteland of yellow sand. Less than 20% of the planet was green. It could be said that the planet's environment was extremely harsh. One had to know that there was a huge difference between planets with life. They were not exactly the same. The true evaluation of a life-bearing planet was mainly based on the prosperity of the living beings on the planet. Generally, the more prosperous life on a planet with life, the more immortal Qi the planet could provide to the continent floating on the planet. It could also increase the overall strength of the continent's cultivators. On the other hand, the more desolate the planet was, the more immortal Qi could degenerate into vitality of extremely poor quality. Celestial Armor Planet in outer space was a living example. The vast celestial armor continent only had 3 demigods. There was not a single heavenly god. It could be said that it was one of the worst planets in the universe. In the universe, celestial armor planet's situation would be unimaginable. Even the worst planets in the universe would not only have 3 demigods. They would have at least 2 demigods. As for powerful planets, they would have more than one heavenly god. Although heavenly gods had to refine planets, powerful planets could find an ordinary planet for their geniuses to refine and become heavenly gods. This would increase the strength of their own planet. The planet in front of them was more than 80% desert. It was called Yellow Dan Planet. Some of the cultivators who knew about the yellow pill star knew that this yellow pill star was formed by immigrants. More than 60 years ago, Chi-Chi, the ruler of the Long River Galaxy, suddenly came to the border and chose Celestial Armor Planet's predecessor, Celestial Armor Planet. After discussing with the heavenly gods of Celestial Armor Planet, the cultivators of Celestial Armor Planet migrated to Yellow Dan Planet. Although Celestial Armor Planet's foundation was not very good, it was much better than Yellow Dan Planet. When Celestial Armor Planet's immigrants first came to Yellow Dan Planet, they were full of complaints. However, Chi-Chi had attached great importance to the Celestial Armor Continent's cultivators who migrated to Celestial Armor Planet. No matter how dissatisfied the cultivators of Yellow Dan Planet were, they did not dare to make a move. They could only watch helplessly. What made them even angrier was that the cultivators who migrated to Zhou Dusk Planet had actually changed the name of Zhou Dusk Planet to Heavenly Armor Planet. As time went by, Sun Yen, the god of Sundan Planet, realized that Chi-Chi had been coming to the Heavenly Armor Planet less and less. In the last 60 years, he had not come even once. Sun Yen boldly guessed that the Heavenly Armor Star had already been given the cold shoulder by Chi-Chi, and he also knew that their Huang Danxing's chance had come. However, the Heavenly Armor Planet was given to them by Chi-Chi, so Sun Yen naturally wouldn't snatch the Heavenly Armor Planet and migrate again. Therefore, not long after Moyan Wushang became a heavenly god, Sun Yen brought 9 demigods to the Heavenly Armor Continent and forcibly dug out all the resources and spiritual stones that they had left behind on the continent. Although Moyan Wushang was also a heavenly god, he hadn't been a heavenly god for long. At present, he was still no match for Sun Yen. Moreover, the demigods of Yellow Dan Planet were much more numerous than the Heavenly Armor Planet, so he didn't dare to act rashly. He could only allow the people of Yellow Dan Planet to dig out the resources of the Heavenly Armor Planet. It was reasonable that the resources of the Heavenly Armor Planet were created by the people of Yellow Dan Planet. Moreover, the reason that Sun Yen found was not wrong, so Moyan Wushang couldn't refute it. Originally, the cultivators of the Heavenly Armor Continent thought that Sun Yen would stop after making a ruckus. They didn't expect the people of Yellow Dan Planet to be restless again, secretly planning something. In the center of the Yellow Dan Continent on Yellow Dan Planet, there was a floating palace. The 2 demigods stepped on the astrolabe and entered the palace. They entered the depths of the palace, where a man in a yellow robe sat upright. "My lord, Moyan Wushang has left the Heavenly Armor Planet again. He should be planning to go to the main planet." The 2 demigods knelt on one knee and said respectfully. The man in the yellow robe was the heavenly god of Yellow Dan Planet, Sun Yen. At this moment, Sun Yen's eyes flashed. He nodded and said, "This Moyan Wushang is smart. He actually thought of going to the main planet to earn divine stones and use them to transform the Heavenly Armor Continent to restore the resources and spirit veins." "My lord, we heard that Moyan Wushang is quite famous on the main planet's Duya Pavilion. Many heavenly gods on the main planet like to go to the Duya Pavilion to listen to Moyan Wushang play songs." One of the demigods didn't understand. Songs could cultivate one's temperament, but to the heavenly gods, it was better than nothing. Even if Moyan Wushang could play songs, he wouldn't be pursued by so many heavenly gods on the main planet. They all knew that the heavenly gods on the main planet were extremely powerful. Even if they were of the same level, they were far more powerful than the heavenly gods on the remote planets. This kind of heavenly god powerhouse should be very self-disciplined. They couldn't understand why these heavenly gods were chasing after Moyan Wushang. Sun Yan's eyes were solemn as he said faintly, "You don't understand. Moyan Wushang's songs are not simple. I don't know why, but when this woman plays the guqin, it always has a strange effect of calming one's heart. In this tranquility, there is a thought-provoking feeling." Back then, Sun Yen had also been to the main planet's Duya Pavilion. He had been fortunate enough to hear Moyan Wushang play the guqin. At that time, he had been immersed in the wonderful feeling brought by the music. This kind of feeling was difficult to achieve, even if he meditated. It could be said that after experiencing this feeling, his originally tired mind was relaxed. On the road to the top, cultivators would always be confused and anxious. After cultivating for countless years, their hearts would already be tired. This kind of tiredness was a natural psychological effect formed by countless years of pursuing power. It was difficult to get rid of it with medicine or precious treasures. But Moyen Wushang's music could. That was why Moyen Wushang was so popular in the Duya Pavilion. Every time she played the guqin, there would be no empty seats. Panda of the Gold Sun Galaxy liked Moyen Wushang's music. At the same time, he also liked Moyen Wushang's temperament. That was why he went to Celestial Armor Planet to express his feelings. The two demigods did not seem to understand, and Sun Yen could not be bothered to continue explaining. Instead, he smiled coldly and said, "It's because of them that we've been forced to migrate to Yellow Dan Planet with such a harsh environment. Back then, the resources that we took away were originally ours. No matter what, these outsiders have to compensate us for being forced to leave our homes." "What do you mean?" The two demigods looked at each other. Moyen Wushang has earned a lot of god stones on the main planet over the years. Now that he has left the Heavenly Armor Planet, let's go take a look. It's only right that we take some god stones as compensation. Sun Yen smiled coldly and then said, "Call the other 7 out. After we go to Celestial Armor Planet and get the god stones, we will come back." Then, even if Moyen Wushang comes back, he can't do anything to Yellow Dan Planet. After a while, Sun Yen gathered the 9 demigods of Yellow Dan Planet. Then, he took out his astrolabe and the 10 of them went to Celestial Armor Planet. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao weren't the only ones on Celestial Armor Planet's Guqin Mountain. There were also Ryuka's higher-ups, Yuan Hongwen, and Ji Chenyen, who represented the Central Continent's geniuses. Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao had reached the level of true immortal. Yuan Hongwen's cultivation was very fast. He had reached the level of demigod. Ji Chenyen was also at the peak of true immortal. She was only half a step away from becoming a demigod. In Celestial Armor Planet, Yuan Hongwen's cultivation was the highest besides Moyen Wushang's. When Sun Yen brought the 9 demigods to Celestial Armor Planet, they attracted the attention of the people on Celestial Armor Planet. The people on Celestial Zither Mountain were also shocked. "Damn it, it's Sun Yen and the others again. They took almost all the resources on Celestial Armor Planet. What are they doing here?" Yuan Hongwen, who was cultivating on Celestial Zither Mountain, was shocked. He noticed Sun Yen and the others immediately. Then Ji Chenyen, Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and the others all noticed that something was wrong. They immediately came out of seclusion and gathered on a huge square on Celestial Zither Mountain. At this moment, Sun Yen and the others had landed on Celestial Zither Mountain. They stared coldly at Yuan Hongwen and the others. "Sun Yen, what is the meaning of this?" Seeing Sun Yen bring the 9 demigods over, Yuan Hongwen's heart sank. His face was a little pale. Sun Yen smiled faintly and said, "Hee, I came here today because I want you to give me some compensation. After all, you are occupying my planet. If you don't give me any compensation, wouldn't that be unreasonable?" Feng Xiao could not stand it. Sun Yen was shameless. She said coldly, "Last time, you sent people to take away all the resources on Celestial Armor Planet. Isn't that enough? Now you're here again. Sun Yen, do you have any shame?" Sun Yen's face fell. He said, "Those resources originally belonged to Celestial Armor Planet. How did they become yours? We took away something that belonged to us. Since it's compensation, how can you give us something that belongs to us as compensation? The so-called compensation should only count if you give us something that belongs to you." Yuan Hongwen's face was gloomy. He already knew what Sun Yen wanted. Sun Yen probably wanted the godstones that Moyen Wushang had earned over the years. Although Moyen Wushang had used most of the godstones to improve Celestial Armor Planet, he had accumulated a lot over the years. In order to speed up their cultivation, Moyen Wushang had even set up a spirit-gathering formation with the godstones to speed up their cultivation. It could be said that the godstones were very useful to the planet. Moyen Wushang had worked hard to earn them. There was no reason for him to take them out. Sun Yen saw the expressions of Yuan Hongwen and the others. he knew that they would not obediently hand them over. However, this time, he did not intend to make them hand them over voluntarily. He had come this time to rob them. Since it is inconvenient for you, I will take back the compensation that belongs to me. Chapter 1919. Reunion. In an instant, the Guqin mountain was enveloped by Sun Yan's power. Yuan Hongwen's pupils shrank and his body stiffened. He could not move at all. Not only him, but the rest of the people in the Guqin mountain were in a similar situation. They were all confined by this terrifying power and could not move. At this moment, the strongest person in the Guqin mountain was Yuan Hongwen, but he was only a demigod. Sun Yan, are you going to rob us? Yuan Hongwen instantly understood Sun Yan's purpose. This guy had waited for Moyan Wushang to step out of the heavenly armor star and then descended on the heavenly armor star. What do you mean by rob? Didn't I say before that I was just asking for compensation? Since it's compensation, then it's what I, Sun Yan, deserve. Sun Yan sneered, and then slowly descended on the Guqin mountain. Sun Yan's shameless explanation immediately made Yuan Hongwen and the others gnash their teeth in hatred. Sun Yan actually used such a dignified reason to rob them. It was really shameless. After descending on the Guqin mountain, Sun Yan's powerful consciousness enveloped the entire Guqin mountain. Immediately his eyes became serious, and even a little hot. Sun Yan instantly disappeared and entered the depths of the Guqin mountain. When Sun Yan came out again, he was full of joy. Let's go. I'm very satisfied with the compensation they gave this time. In the future, Huang Danxing and the heavenly armor star don't owe each other anything. After saying that, Sun Yan left the heavenly armor star with 9 demigods. At the same time, the suppression on Yuan Hongwen and the others disappeared. Then, Yuan Hongwen turned into a shadow and entered the depths of the Guqin mountain. When Yuan Hongwen came out again, his face was gloomy and he said, "That bastard Sun Yan, he opened the array formation that Wushang used to store divine stone, and all the 1,000 low-grade divine stone inside were taken away by Sun Yan." What? Those are the divine stones that Wushang accumulated over the years. Sun Yan, that bastard? Feng Xiao's beautiful eyes were full of fire. Fortunately, Wushang carried the middle-grade divine stone with him. If even the middle-grade divine stone was taken by Sun Yan, we would have suffered a great loss, Yuan Hongwen said bitterly. Ji Chenyan, who had been silent, suddenly asked, "What should we do now?" Yuan Hongwen smiled bitterly and said, "Let's wait for Wushang to come back first. However, Huang Danxing's foundation is stronger than ours. If we meet force with force, we won't be Huang Danxing's opponent. I'm afraid we'll have to swallow this loss ourselves." The others all fell silent, especially Ji Chenyan. Her beautiful eyes were full of indignation. She was very clear that if their heavenly armor star was very powerful, Huang Danxing would not have bullied them like this. Huang Danxing. In the starry sky outside the heavenly armor planet, a black figure stood on a floating rock. An enormous consciousness enveloped the entire heavenly armor planet. The conversation between Yuan Hongwen and the others was clearly visible to this person's consciousness. Taking a closer look, it was a young man standing on the broken rock. His gaze towards the heavenly armor star was filled with nostalgia. Needless to say, this person was Zhuan. Not long after Sun Yan left the heavenly armor planet, Zhuan happened to arrive at the heavenly armor planet. With Zhuan's enormous consciousness, it was easy for him to capture the conversation between Yuan Hongwen and the others on the Guqin mountain. He also knew what had happened just now. Thinking of this, he also knew that Huang Danxing and the others should have just left the heavenly armor planet. Therefore, his consciousness instantly radiated out and traversed through the starry sky. Now that Zhuan's spirit had reached the middle stage of the divine realm, its power was comparable to that of a peak divine realm expert. The range of his consciousness was many times greater than that of Sun Yan, who was in the early stage of the divine realm. Not far from the heavenly armor planet, Sun Yan and the 9 demigods were riding on the astrolabe, leisurely heading towards Huang Danxing. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying divine sense enveloped them and firmly locked onto the group of 9. Sun Yan's body stiffened and he quickly stopped the astrolabe. The 9 demigods who were still on the astrolabe looked at Sun Yan in confusion. They did not understand why Sun Yan stopped. Sun Yan immediately bowed and said respectfully, "May I know which senior is nearby?" The 9 demigods reacted one after another. Only now did they realize that a soul consciousness as powerful as heaven's might had firmly locked onto their astrolabes. Their faces changed drastically as they hurriedly followed Sun Yan's lead. They didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. At this moment, Sun Yan did not dare to move. This consciousness was too terrifying and firmly locked onto him like shackles. He knew very well that if he acted rashly, he would immediately anger the owner of this consciousness. "Hand over everything and get out of my sight." A majestic voice came from afar and kept ringing in the ears of Sun Yan and the others like countless muffled thunders. Sun Yan's face changed. He did not expect the owner of this consciousness to rob him on the way. Moreover, he was robbing a junior. Judging from the strength of this consciousness, Sun Yan guessed that the owner of this consciousness was either a late-stage or peak divine realm expert. Such an existence was considered a powerhouse even on the main star and was not someone he, who was only in the early stage of the divine realm, could contend with. "Senior, let's talk nicely. Do you want something from me? If that's the case, Senior, please don't hesitate to ask." Junior will definitely hand over what Senior wants. Sun Yan asked tentatively. However, as soon as Sun Yan finished speaking, the consciousness suddenly became violent. Sun Yan only felt a buzzing sound in his head and a sweet taste in his throat. He was caught off guard and was hit by this consciousness attack. Sun Yan secretly cursed the despicable owner of this consciousness for launching a consciousness attack under such circumstances. However, he also knew that this consciousness had already shown mercy. If this consciousness had really attacked with full force, Sun Yan would have been seriously injured. "Are you still going to talk nonsense? I mean, leave everything you have and get out of my sight." The voice repeated again. Sun Yan did not dare to be negligent this time and quickly took out his spiritual rings and handed them over. The 9 demigods beside him also took out their spiritual rings very consciously. "Also, hand over the astrolabe under your feet." The voice spoke again and immediately caused Sun Yan and the others to be dissatisfied. Without the astrolabe, it was impossible for them to travel in the starry sky for too long. Sun Yan was fine as he was a divine realm expert and the yellow Dan star was not far away. He could use his star god power to return. However, the 9 demigods beside him could not fly in the starry sky for too long. "Sir." Just as Sun Yan was about to speak, the consciousness suddenly became terrifying. Sun Yan immediately swallowed the words that he wanted to say. He then rolled up his sleeves and escaped with the 9 demigods. After Sun Yan escaped, the consciousness did not pursue him. Instead, it looked around and after confirming that there was no one around, a figure quickly flew over. Zhuan put away the 9 spiritual rings that were floating in the starry sky and then left the place. After a while, Zhuan returned to the heavenly armor star and landed on the ancient Zither mountain. Originally, Yuan Hongwen and the others were still gathered in the square and sighing. Now that they suddenly saw someone land on the ancient Zither mountain, they all became nervous. They all thought that Sun Yan had returned. However, when they saw who it was, they were all stunned and immediately revealed a look of surprise. "Lun, my child, are you really back?" Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao were the first to react and immediately went up to greet him. Yuan Hongwen and Ji Chenyan also came back to their senses and followed closely behind. Then the Ryuka Long Xiangding and other Ryuka higher-ups, who were also related to Zhuowen, gathered around Zhuan. "Father, mother, grandfather." Zhuan greeted Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Long Xiangding who came up to greet him. There was a look of excitement in his eyes. He had stayed in the Devourer larva for a full 60 years. After staying in such a dark place for so long, even Zhuowen felt lonely and lonely. Now that he saw his family and friends, Zhuowen naturally couldn't hide his excitement and joy. Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, and Long Xiangding quickly helped Zhuowen up. Among them, Feng Xiao held Zhuowen's hand and looked him up and down. She was so excited that she cried and hugged Juan. Feeling Feng Xiao's warm embrace, Zhuowen's heart warmed and he gently patted Feng Xiao's shoulder. Yuan Hongwen originally wanted to speak, but seeing the scene of mother and son reunion in front of him, he swallowed back the words he wanted to say. However, Yuan Hongwen soon found something strange. He found that Zhuowen's aura was no longer that of a heavenly god, but a demigod, which shocked Yuan Hongwen. He remembered that when Zhuan left the Long River Galaxy, he was already an early-stage heavenly god. And now, 60 years have passed, and Zhuan was the disciple of the powerful Taiqing sect. He felt that Zhuowen's cultivation should be at the middle stage or late stage heavenly god. How could he have regressed? Although he was puzzled, Yuan Hongwen didn't say anything. He knew that there must be something hidden here. Not only Yuan Hongwen, but Ji Chenyan, Long Xiaotian, and the others also found that something was wrong. Although they couldn't see through Zhuowen's aura, they had seen heavenly gods before. Zhuowen's aura was definitely below that of a heavenly god. They estimated that he was only a demigod. Feng Xiao looked at Zhuowen and found that something was wrong. She looked at Zhuowen and her face changed slightly. She said, "Child, your cultivation has regressed?" Zhuowen's eyes flashed. From everyone's attitude, Yuan could see that they didn't know what had happened in the Taiqing immortal realm. Logically speaking, what he had done in the Taiqing immortal realm was enough to shock the entire Huaxia heavenly realm. Even if the Long River Galaxy was far away from the core of the heavenly realm, there should be some rumors. Thinking of this, Yuan felt that something was wrong. It seemed that someone had purposely blocked the news about the Taiqing immortal realm, and this person was most likely the true god sovereign of the Long River Galaxy, Qi. As for why Qi would do this, Yuan didn't need to think to guess. It was probably because Taiqing and Yuqing had stayed here for a while, which made the Long River Galaxy suddenly popular. Qi didn't want to attribute the reason to Zhuowen, so he blocked the news. At least, he didn't want the people of the Heavenly Armor Continent to know about Yuan. Once they knew, they would definitely reveal the real reason. Chapter 1920. Insignia. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Mother and everyone else, I will explain everything to you when the time comes. However, now is not the time." Hearing Zhuowen's words, the others did not say anything. The Ryuka were Zhuowen's most ardent admirers, so they naturally obeyed Zhuowen's words. As for Yuan Hongwen and Ji Chenyan, after witnessing Zhuowen's terrifying strength, they were already in awe of Zhuowen. Naturally, they did not say anything. "Father, what about the blood splatter?" Zhuowen looked at Long Xiaotian. Before he left, he had given the blood splatter to Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian smiled bitterly and said, "The blood splatter weapon spirit you gave me was too unique. It called itself Master Long, and did not stay on the heavenly armor planet for long before it left." "What? He broke through the void and left?" Zhuowen frowned slightly. He had told Xiao He to wait for him on the heavenly armor planet. Why did it suddenly leave? Zhuowen knew Xiao He's personality very well. He knew that Xiao He would not leave without important matters. What happened? Zhuowen muttered to himself. He wanted to secretly sense Xiao He's location, but he realized that his connection with Xiao He was pitifully weak. Xiao He no longer existed in his soul. Instead, it had become the weapon spirit of the blood splatter. Zhuowen had not even refined the blood splatter yet. He knew that this method of searching for Xiao He would not work. Although his connection with Xiao He was weak, he could still vaguely sense that Xiao He was in the Long River Galaxy. However, he could not sense Xiao He's exact location. "Looks like I'll have to stay in the Long River Galaxy for a while." Yuan had a headache. Initially, he wanted to swallow the heavenly armor star into Devour's body. He understood clearly that as long as Devour didn't take in the energy of the planet could survive in his body, and the creatures inside wouldn't be affected. Now, Xiao He had suddenly left Celestial Armor Planet. This made things difficult for Zhuowen. He had to stay in the Long River system for a while to find Xiao He. "Oh right, Wushang went to the Long River Galaxy's main planet? Why is she going there?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. Feng Xiao nodded and said, "Wushang had already advanced to the Divine Realm 20 years ago. She went to the main star mainly to earn divine stones." Feng Xiao explained everything that had happened in the past 60 years to Zhuan. Especially when he heard that Sun Yen had shamelessly come to steal the resources of the heavenly armor continent, Zhuan narrowed his eyes, revealing a trace of killing intent. He thought that he had let Sun Yen and the others off too easily by robbing them of their spiritual rings. At the same time, he also knew that Moyan Wushang was in a private room on the main star, earning divine stones by playing music. However, Feng Xiao deliberately didn't mention anything about Panda. Although she knew that Zhuan was a disciple of the Tai Ching sect, judging from the decline of Zhuan's cultivation base, something must have happened to Zhuan. She didn't want Zhuan to worry about this matter. Besides, Zhuan was only a demigod, and there was still a big gap between him and the divine realm. Panda's guards were all middle-stage divine realm experts, and he had the Gold Sun Galaxy as his backing. If she told him, with Zhuan's character, he would probably take the initiative to look for Panda. However, Zhuan was definitely not Panda's opponent, and it would make things worse. Hearing this, Zhuan more or less knew the ins and outs of the matter. He also knew that Moyan Wushang usually only stayed on the main star for 10 days, so Zhuan was relieved. He would wait for Moyan Wushang to come back on the heavenly armor planet, and then look for Xiaohe. Ancient Zither Mountain, in an elegant attic, Zhuan sat cross-legged, and there were 10 spiritual rings in front of him. There was a difference between the spiritual rings. Sun Yan's spiritual ring was obviously of a higher grade, and the space inside was much larger. What made Zhuan satisfied was that there were divine stones in all 10 spiritual rings. There were about 5,000 divine stones in total, and he also found a middle-grade divine stone in Sun Yan's spiritual ring. Divine stones were naturally divided into different grades, and the division was the same as the spirit stones of the heavenly armor continent. They were divided into low-grade, mid-grade, high-grade, and top-grade. Low-grade divine stones were the lowest grade, and they were the most common divine stones in the heavenly domain, while top-grade divine stones were extremely rare. After Zhuan put away the 5,000 low-grade divine stones and the middle-grade divine stone, he looked at Sun Yan's spiritual ring again. He had already checked the other 9 spiritual rings, and the things inside were useless to him, so he planned to give them to Long Xiaotian to distribute. However, there were quite a lot of things in Sun Yan's spiritual ring. Although there were no heavenly divine artifacts, Yun found a bottle of mysterious yellow qi, a spiritual grass with a threatening purple light, and some other miscellaneous things. Although Zhuan had never ventured into the starry sky, when he was in the Tai Ching immortal realm, he had always stayed in the golden depository. Other than comprehending void heaven-grade divine abilities, he would occasionally read some knowledge about the starry sky. Moreover, he had inherited the young devourer's sea of knowledge, and the young devourer's memories were inherited from the young devourer. With the young devourer's countless years of experience, what had he not seen in the starry sky? First grade divine herb, purple lucky grass. Yun looked at the purple lucky grass in silence. The things in the starry sky were no longer spiritual herbs, but divine herbs. Even if it was a first-grade divine herb, it was still something that could only be found by chance, but not by searching for it. The purple lucky grass had a great effect. Although it was only a first-grade divine herb, it had the miraculous effect of recovering divine power. In a battle of the same level, as long as one had the purple lucky grass and swallowed it, one would be able to fight a protracted battle. As for the mysterious yellow qi, needless to say, it was also very useful to Zhuan. However, the bottle of mysterious yellow qi in Sun Yan's spiritual ring was too small. If it was given to Zhuan to cultivate the mysterious yellow immortal, he wouldn't even be able to advance to the first stage of the Hotian realm. It seems like I have to go to the main star to take a look for the mysterious yellow qi. It just so happens that Wu Shang is on the main star. Why don't I go there and take a look? Zhuan put away the spiritual ring and walked out of the pavilion. He found Long Xiaolan and gave the spiritual rings of the 9 demigods besides Sun Yen to him. Then he took out 4,000 low-grade divine stones and gave them to Long Xiaotian. Long Xiaotian was a little surprised that Zhuan took out so many spiritual rings and divine stones, but he wasn't surprised. After all, Zhuan was a disciple of the Tai Ching sect. Such a small amount of divine stones shouldn't be a problem for Zhuan. After exhorting a few more words, Yun took out his astrolabe and left the heavenly armor star. The astrolabe he seized wasn't very fast. It was much slower than Zhuowen's own speed. It should be the lowest grade astrolabe. However, Zhuowen was only a demigod. If he traveled across the starry sky, wouldn't it be telling others that he was different from the rest? The main star of the Long River Galaxy was called the Long River Star. It was the core of the Long River Galaxy. The number of heavenly gods in the Long River Galaxy far exceeded the total number of heavenly gods in the other planets in the Long River Galaxy. Around the Long River Star, there were 4 secondary stars. These 4 secondary stars were dependent on the Long River Star. In the entire Long River Galaxy, their power was only below the Long River Star. This was because the 4 secondary stars each had a false true god. The false true god was a heavenly god whose cultivation had reached the limit of a heavenly god. They were only a hair's breadth away from becoming a true god. They were called false true gods. Although the false true gods on the 4 secondary stars weren't true gods, their strength was far beyond that of a peak heavenly god. It could be said that the 4 secondary stars had great prestige in the Long River Galaxy. All the heavenly gods were afraid of these 4 secondary stars. When Zhuowen first entered the Long River Star, he noticed the 4 secondary stars surrounding the Long River Star. However, he didn't pay much attention to them. The astrolabe's speed was quite fast. In about half a day, it was already close to the Long River Star. When Zhuowen was about to enter the Long River Star, he felt a stagnant feeling. Then, his astrolabe couldn't help but retreat a few dozen feet before coming to a stop. "What's going on?" Zhuowen whispered in surprise. When he was with Tai Ching and Yu Qing, he didn't feel this hindrance. "Huh, is this your first time in the Long River Star? It seems like you don't know the rules of the Long River Star at all." Suddenly, a hearty voice sounded. Behind Zhuowen, a ray of starlight flashed and appeared not far from him. In front of him was a man and a woman. The two of them were riding on the same astrolabe. Moreover, Zhuowen also noticed that the starlight on the surface of the astrolabe of the two people was much brighter than his astrolabe. It seemed like their astrolabes were of a higher grade than his. The man was tall and strong, and the woman was charming and pretty. However, what made Zhuowen uncomfortable was that the woman was like a sticky candy. She stuck to the man's side and made all kinds of intimate actions. She was like a cat in heat. "Brother, please enlighten me." Zhuowen cupped his fists and asked. There is a powerful formation set up by an arcane divine master tens of thousands of feet away from the Long River Star. If you don't have a certificate to enter the Long River Star, you will be rejected by this formation. The man smiled. A formation set up by an arcane divine master. Zhuowen was shocked. He was a little glad that this formation wasn't an offensive formation. Otherwise, with the level of the arcane divine master's formation skills, Zhuowen would be in a difficult position. The reason why Tai Ching and Yu Qing could enter the Long River Star so easily was probably because their strength was too high. They didn't care about the formation here. Therefore, Zhuowen didn't feel anything at that time. "Brother, please enlighten me. How can I get a certificate to enter the Long River Star?" Zhuowen asked politely. The man laughed and immediately took out a badge from his spiritual ring and said, "Brother, it is fate that we met. This badge is the certificate to enter the Long River Star. Coincidentally, I have an extra one. I will give it to you." Zhuowen was surprised. This was the first time he had met this person. It was a little unbelievable that this person would give him the certificate to enter the Long River Star. However, Zhuowen was in a hurry to enter the Long River Star. He didn't think too much and took the badge. Soon, Zhuowen's eyes became sharp. However, this sharpness only lasted for a moment. The tall man also noticed Zhuowen's expression, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He smiled and asked, "Brother, is there a problem?" Chapter 1921. Tangji, so that's how it is. I'm Tangji, and she's my cultivation partner, Tan Haiba. The tall man took a deep look at Zhuowen, and then pointed to the woman beside him and introduced her. Zhuowen looked at the woman who was sticking to the tall man like a cat in heat. He felt that there was something strange about this woman, but he couldn't tell exactly what it was. Moreover, the cultivation of these two people wasn't too high. The tall man was an early-stage divine god, and the woman was only a demigod. "I'm Longwen." Yun cupped his fists and said, "Let's go in first." Tang Ji pointed to the badge on his chest, and then stepped into the range of the Long River Star. He was not affected by the previous array at all. Zhuan knew that Tang Ji was reminding him of the use of the badge. He sneered in his heart, but still wore the badge on his chest. Perhaps because he noticed that Zhuan wore the badge, Tang Ji's smile grew wider, and his face became more enthusiastic. "Brother Long, the Long River Star doesn't have any land companion creatures. All the people on this planet are cultivators, and there are no mortals. I wonder why Brother Long has come to the Long River Star this time?" Tang Ji asked enthusiastically. "Hee, I came to the Long River Star this time for Miss Moyan Wushang of the Great Accord Pavilion. I heard that Miss Wushang's song is very magical. I also want to hear how magical it is," Zhuan said with a faint smile. Tang Ji's eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, "So Brother Long has come for Miss Wushang of the Great Accord Pavilion. I'm familiar with the Great Accord Pavilion. It's in the main city of the Long River Star. Coincidentally, I have a residence in the main city. Why don't Brother Long come to my place as a guest, and let me play host?" Zhuan sneered in his heart. He was sure that there was something wrong with Tang Ji. When he received the badge, he found that there was a divine sense imprint on the badge. As long as Zhuan wore the badge, the owner of the divine sense imprint would be able to find the location of Zhuan. This divine sense imprint was extremely obscure. Let alone a demigod, even an early-stage heavenly god cultivator might not be able to detect it. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's spiritual sense was much stronger than the average divine realm expert. The moment he received the badge, he discovered the spiritual sense imprint within it. However, Zhuan did not erase the spiritual consciousness imprint in the badge. He wanted to see what Tang Ji was planning. Moreover, he was indeed unfamiliar with the Long River Star. With Tang Ji leading the way, it would save him a lot of trouble. Of course, if this Tang Ji really had evil intentions towards him, Zhuan wouldn't be afraid. Even though he hadn't advanced to the heavenly god realm yet, relying on his powerful divine sense and his young fleshly body, he wasn't even afraid of a mid-stage heavenly god. Even a late heavenly god might not be able to do anything to him, let alone a mere Tang Ji. Under Tang Ji's lead, the three of them quickly entered Long River Star's main city. Although the main city of Long River Star was magnificent, it paled in comparison to Zhuan, who had seen the Taiching Wonderland. However, Zhuan discovered that not all the cultivators in Long River Star's main city were above the heavenly god realm. Most of them were demigods, and there were even true immortals and heavenly immortals. However, these were the bottom rung of the main city. Many cultivators below the heavenly god realm who didn't have any background were basically doing heavy and dirty work in the main city. There was even a restaurant not far away, where the waiter who was enthusiastically shouting outside was a true immortal. It was the first time Zhuan had seen such a scene, so his eyes revealed a strange look. Whether it was a true immortal or a demigod, in an ordinary continent, they were considered the pinnacle of existence. However, in Long River Star's main city, they were the bottom rung. This contrast caused quite a shock to Zhuan. Although Tang Ji had been leading the way, he had been observing Zhuan with his divine sense. After seeing the strange look on Zhuan's face, he was even more certain that Zhuan was just a rogue cultivator without any background. Not long after, Tang Ji led Zhuan through a street and arrived at a residence that was neither too big nor too small. Moreover, the surroundings of the residence were covered in formations that fluctuated quite a bit. It wasn't just this house. All the buildings in the main city were protected by a formation. The only difference was the strength of the formation. "Brother Long, the land price in the main city is extremely expensive. Back then, I spent a lot of money to buy this house." When they arrived in front of his house, Tang Ji said proudly. Obviously, he was quite proud of being able to buy a house in the main city. "Brother Tang, is the land price in the main city very expensive? If I may be so bold, may I ask Brother Tang how many divine stones you spent to purchase this residence?" Zhuowen looked at Tang Ji's expression and naturally went along with it. Tang Ji smiled and waved his hand. He said, "Actually, it's only 100,000 divine stones. This is just a relatively ordinary house. The real luxurious houses easily cost millions or even tens of millions of divine stones." Speaking of luxurious houses, Tang Ji's expression was full of yearning. Obviously, he had a great desire for those luxurious houses in the main city. Zhuowen was stunned. He was surprised by the price of this house. Such a small place actually cost 100,000 divine stones. In Zhuowen's opinion, if this wasn't robbery, then what was? In Zhuowen's opinion, these residences were just places to stay. How could they be worth such a high price? Perhaps seeing Zhuowen's confusion, Tang Ji smiled and explained, "Brother Long, there's something you don't know. The houses in the main city are different from those in other places. This is because all the buildings in the main city have powerful formations. These formations are all created by arcane masters. Every building will have 3 basic formations. They are the offensive formation, the defensive formation, and the most important one, the Great Convergence formation. The luxurious houses have more formations, and the Great Convergence formation is of a higher level." Hearing this, Zhuowen finally understood. He had heard of the Great Convergence formation before. This kind of formation could assist the cultivation of heavenly gods and true gods. It was said that the higher the level of the Great Convergence formation, the faster the cultivation speed. It could save a cultivator a lot of cultivation time. He knew that the price of land in the main city was so high not because of the location, but because of the formations in the houses. In particular, the Great Convergence formation was a necessary formation for cultivators above the heavenly god realm. This kind of formation could only be set up by divine arcane masters. "Brother Tang, you're amazing. You're able to buy your own house in the main city at such a young age." Tan Haiba, who had been sticking to Tang Ji, said with admiration. Zhuowen shook his head. Whether it was the world of cultivators or Earth, there would always be people who worshipped money. "Brother Long, come in and have a seat." Zhuowen didn't reject Tang Ji's invitation. He followed Tang Ji into the house after removing the defensive formation. Once he entered the house, Zhuowen immediately realized that the Great Convergence formation had started to operate. Then, the star god power in his body seemed to be boiling. The speed of the circulation in his body was several times faster than usual. This Great Convergence formation is indeed magical. It can actually increase the speed of the circulation of star god power. Zhuowen thought in his heart. He knew that if he were to sit cross-legged and cultivate, the circulation speed of his star divine power would be even faster. If he had the assistance of divine stones in his cultivation, the growth speed of his star divine power would most likely be 10 times faster than usual. Tang Ji found a good room in the house. At the same time, he imprinted the map of the main city on a jade slip and gave the key to the house to Zhuowen. Then, he brought Tan Haiba into the master bedroom of the house in a hurry. Tan Haiba also knew what was going to happen. The charm in her eyes became even stronger. After Tang Ji and Tan Haiba entered the master bedroom, they activated the Divine Sense Concealment formation. Zhuowen didn't need to guess to know what the two were going to do. Even if the Divine Sense Concealment formation was nothing to Zhuowen's powerful Divine Sense, Zhuowen was too lazy to peek at the two of them. Sitting in the room, Zhuowen looked at the map in the jade slip and had a general understanding of the main city. Let's go to the Grace Room first. Wushang has only been in the main city for 2 days. I wonder how she is doing there? Zhuowen put away the jade slip and left Tang Ji's house. However, not long after Zhuowen left, the door of the master bedroom of the house slowly opened. Tang Ji slowly walked out. At this moment, Tang Ji's clothes were still intact. His eyes were calm, and he didn't have the slightest bit of urgency like before. Brother Tang, when this guy took the badge, his expression changed. Did he discover the Divine Sense imprint in the badge? Tan Haiba followed behind Tang Ji. The charm on her face had long disappeared. Tang Ji shook his head and said, "A mere demigod wouldn't be able to discover the Divine Sense imprint in the badge. Moreover, I found that this person shouldn't be an ordinary demigod. I'm afraid that the upper house will be quite satisfied with this person. I don't know why the upper house wants to buy a demigod cultivator. We can only look for this kind of demigod cultivator with no background. We've been exhausted during this period of time, but we finally found this one. Tan Haiba frowned. Tangji smiled and said, we don't need to guess the upper house's intentions. As long as we can earn divine stones, it's fine. Why bother with the upper house? Tan Haiba nodded and said, Brother Tang, should we contact the upper house now? It's better to get rid of this guy as soon as possible. Let's contact them immediately. When this kid comes back today, we'll prepare to trap him in the house. When the time comes, we'll let the upper house take this kid away. We'll also be able to get satisfactory divine stones. As Tangji spoke, he took out a yellow talisman from his spirit ring. He burned the yellow talisman, and a wisp of black smoke quietly left the place. Even the formation of the house couldn't stop the black smoke from leaving. Zhuan strolled through the streets and soon arrived at the Hall of Sovereigns. Zhuan was no stranger to the Hall of Sovereigns. It was Qi-Qi's residence. Tai Qing and Yu Qing used to live in the Hall of Sovereigns. Looking at the heavily guarded Hall of Sovereigns, Zhuan shook his head. He didn't plan to go in. Although Qi-Qi knew him, he knew that Qi-Qi should know about him in the Tai Qing immortal realm. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, he didn't want to meet Qi-Qi. Chapter 1922. See-through Duya Pavilion was not small, and the entertainment facilities inside were very comprehensive. It could be said that there was everything inside, and it was an extremely famous building in the main city. Seeing the environment of Duya Pavilion, Yuan frowned slightly. Although the name of Duya Pavilion sounded good, there were people coming and going inside, like a market to buy vegetables. This made Yuan very unhappy. This time, after finding Wushang, Yuan was ready to take her away from here. After entering Duya Pavilion, a woman in a green dress immediately came to greet them. She looked at Zhuan and found that he was only a demigod. The enthusiasm in her beautiful eyes faded a lot, but she was still very polite. What do you want to play in Duya Pavilion this time? The woman in green dress asked with a smile. Zhuan did not know much about the entertainment facilities in Duya Pavilion, but he was not interested. I came here because of your reputation. I want to hear Miss Moyan Wushang play a song. Zhuan said. The woman in green dress nodded slightly and said, Miss Wushang's performance time is at night. It's not time for the performance yet. You can play with other facilities inside until night time. Zhuan was startled, then waved his hand and said, Then forget it. I'll come again at night. After saying that, Zhuan left Duya Pavilion. Besides looking for Moyan Wushang, Yuan also wanted to buy black and yellow qi in Long River Star. He planned to cultivate black and yellow immortal to the second level of the Xiantian realm as soon as possible, then he would fulfill his promise to Yen Tianwei. Moreover, Yuan was now occupying the body of the infant devourer. If he cultivated black and yellow immortal, his body's strength would probably rise to another level. The map in the jade slip given by Tangji was very detailed. He quickly followed the map and came to the biggest shop in the main city. This shop was called Long River Shop. It was said that the Hall of Gods opened in the main city. Zhuan knew that there must be something like black and yellow qi inside. What made Zhuan speechless was that he had to pay a god stone to enter the shop. This shop had 2 floors, and each floor was extremely large. Furthermore, there was a dazzling array of goods displayed inside. There were godly medicines, godly pills, godly weapons, and all kinds of refining materials. Zhuan even saw a grade 1 divine herb, purple lucky grass. Moreover, this purple lucky grass was not cheap, as 1 stalk would cost 200 divine stones. Not long after, Zhuan saw the heaven and earth qi that he needed. This was a rather large cabinet. The cabinet was surrounded by a powerful array formation. The cabinet was transparent, and one could see that there were bottles of different sizes inside. Among them, the larger bottles were dozens of feet in size, while the smaller ones were only the size of a palm. The black and yellow qi that Zhuan had obtained from Sun Yan's spirit ring was only the size of a palm. For this reason, Zhuan had specially checked the price of this palm-sized black and yellow qi. When he saw that this small bottle of black and yellow qi actually cost 1,000 divine stones, Zhuowen's face immediately turned ugly. Then he looked at the largest bottle and discovered that the price had actually increased by 20 times. It actually cost 200,000 divine stones. Zhuon was very clear that if he wanted to cultivate the black and yellow immortal to the Xiantian realm, he would at least need the largest bottle of black and yellow qi. However, 200,000 divine stones was simply a sky-high price for Zhuon. He had only obtained 5,000 divine stones from Sun Yen and the other 9 demigod spirit rings, of which he had given 1,000 divine stones to Long Xiaoyun. Now, he only had a pitiful 4,000 divine stones on him. Shaking his head, Yuan could only give up on buying the black and yellow qi. The price was simply too expensive. Moreover, he was embarrassingly short of money. He simply couldn't afford it. After strolling around the Long River shop, Zhuon discovered that most of the items here were extremely expensive. With only 4,000 divine stones on him, there were only a few items that he could afford. Zhuon was somewhat dispirited and left the shop. At the same time, he looked at the sky and discovered that there was still a long time before the Xiantian hour. Therefore, he decided to return to Tang Ji's house first. When Zhuon returned to Tang Ji's house, he immediately felt that something was wrong. At this moment, there was no one in the house. It was eerily quiet. Zhuon released his divine sense and discovered that Tang Ji and Tan Haibao were not in the master bedroom. Frowning slightly, Zhuon didn't take it to heart. Instead, he returned to his room and sat cross-legged. After about half an hour, Zhuon suddenly opened his eyes. He discovered that the great concentration array in the house had stopped operating. Walking out of the room, Zhuon came to the door. He took out the key that Tang Ji had given him and was about to open the door. However, the moment he placed the key on the door, an ominous feeling arose in his heart. Then, a white light suddenly swept out from the door and turned into a net to bind Zhuon. Zhuon was caught off guard and was immediately trapped by the net of white light. At the same time, the door in front of him slowly opened and a man and a woman walked out. The man and the woman were Tang Ji and Tan Haibao, who were not in the house. "Brother Tang, what is the meaning of this?" Zhuon frowned slightly and asked in confusion. At this moment, Tang Ji was no longer as polite as before. Instead, his eyes were filled with condescension. Tan Haibao revealed a sarcastic smile and said, "What a stupid guy. He doesn't even know that he has been betrayed. However, it's good that he is stupid. We don't have to go through so much trouble." Zhuowen's consciousness quietly observed the net of white light around him. He realized that the white light was not weak. It was impossible for an ordinary demigod to escape from the net of white light. However, to Zhuon, it was not difficult to escape from the net of white light. However, he was not in a hurry. He wanted to ask the two of them what their intentions were. "What do you mean?" Zhuowen's voice was trembling. At the same time, his eyes revealed a hint of fear. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, Tan Haibao's beautiful eyes were filled with pride. She sneered and said, "Didn't I say just now? Of course, we are going to betray you." Boom. However, before Tan Haibao could finish speaking, the net of white light in front of them suddenly broke. Zhuon swept toward Tan Haibao like a hot knife through butter. Tan Haibao obviously did not expect Zhuon to break out of the net. She screamed and was stunned on the spot. "How dare you!" Tang Ji's pupils shrank. However, he reacted quickly. He grabbed with his right hand. Star God energy spread out and turned into a giant hand that grabbed at Zhuon. Tan Haibao took a few steps back. Seeing Tang Ji make a move, her heart relaxed. Tang Ji was in the early heavenly god realm. Longwen was just a demigod. Tang Ji would definitely be helpless against him. Tang Ji had just made a move when he realized that something was wrong. Zhuowen's attack suddenly changed. He was actually rushing toward him. "You want to fight me head-on? You are simply courting death." Tang Ji quickly guessed Zhuowen's intention. The corner of his mouth revealed a mocking smile. His right hand gathered even more terrifying star god energy, hoping to injure Zhuowen severely. Bang! The two of them collided in an instant. Then, a crackling sound rang out. Tang Ji vomited blood and flew backward, smashing heavily on the ground. At the same time, Yuan was like a ghost. He appeared in front of Tang Ji in an instant. His right hand formed a sword finger and shot out a milky white sword light. It pierced into Tang Ji's dantian and crushed it. Tang Ji's eyes widened. With his dantian broken, he immediately felt a sense of weakness fill his body. In the end, he fell to the ground. Tan Haiba's beautiful eyes were lifeless. She pointed at Zhuan and screamed. She really could not understand. This Long One was clearly a demigod. How could he subdue Tang Ji so easily? Scream again and I will kill you. Yuan coldly stared at Tan Haiba. The latter immediately shut her mouth and did not dare to scream again. However, from her trembling body, it was obvious that she was very afraid. Zhuan pointed at the sword Qi in his right hand. The sword shadow turned into thorns and tied Tan Haiba up. He threw her to Tang Ji's side. Then he looked down at the two of them and said, I have no enmity with you. We have never met before. Why did you two have such bad intentions? Tang Ji secretly complained in his heart. The strength that Zhuan displayed was too strong. He defeated him in an instant and shattered his dantian. He knew that he had kicked an iron plate. Tang Ji was also a smart person. He knew that Zhuan did not destroy his divine soul. He only destroyed his dantian. He probably did not intend to kill him. Instead, he wanted to find out the purpose of their actions. Therefore, without waiting for Zhuan to continue, Tang Ji immediately said, Senior, please spare my life. We were forced to do all of this. The ones who really wanted to capture you are not us. We have never wanted to harm you. Zhuan sneered in his heart. Naturally, he would not listen to Tang Ji's words. He just stared at the latter coldly. Tang Ji felt goosebumps from the stare. He braced himself and explained everything clearly. Yuan listened in silence. Only then did he know that Tang Ji was a human trafficker. Tang Ji would often wander around the Long River planet. As long as he met a cultivator who was only a demigod and had just entered the Long River planet for the first time, he would be invited to the Long River planet. As long as the cultivators were deceived, Tang Ji would invite them into his house. Then, Tang Ji would contact his family and let them take away the trapped cultivators and profit from it. No wonder Tang Ji could buy such a good house in the main city when he was only in the early heavenly god stage. His main source of income was probably from selling demigod cultivators. However, what made Zhuan curious was, who was the family and why did they want to buy demigod cultivators? Moreover, he heard from Tang Ji that the same family had been buying demigod cultivators for many years. He had already worked with them many times. Who is the family? Do you know? Zhuan narrowed his eyes and said coldly. Tang Ji's expression was a little unnatural. He hurriedly said, Senior, I don't know the family's background. After all, how could I let you know the details of this kind of business? Seeing Tang Ji's unnatural expression, Zhuan knew that this guy was lying. After working with them so many times, Zhuan did not believe that Tang Ji would not know the family's background at all. Zhuan put his sword finger between Tang Ji's brows and said, You're a smart person. You know what to do. Tang Ji's pupils shrank. In the end, he sighed and said, I'll say it. I only hope that Senior can let me live. Sure, Zhuan nodded. He did not plan to kill Tang Ji. Chapter 1923. Tan Yushuowen's eyes narrowed. He had never thought that Tang Ji's so-called upper family would be from the Dark Star. Zhuan had heard of the 4 secondary stars around the Long River Star. These 4 secondary stars were the King Star, the Dark Star, the Fire Star, and the Extreme Star. These 4 secondary planets were the 4 most powerful life planets in the Long River Galaxy apart from the main planet, the Long River Star. As for the 4 secondary planets, their star lords were far stronger than peak heavenly god. It was said that they had reached the level of false true god. It could be said that it was difficult for anyone below true god to fight them. After seizing the body of the infant devourer, although Zhuowen's strength had increased tremendously, facing these false true gods, Zhuan was still not their opponent. However, Zhuan believed that if he advanced to the heavenly god realm, he would be invincible under the true god realm. At that time, he would be able to absorb the adult devourer's energy without restraint. Since he had yet to advance to the heavenly god realm, absorbing the adult devourer's energy would be a waste. After all, he couldn't increase his cultivation realm. Absorbing the energy would only increase his strength temporarily. Dark Star? According to you, your upper family's people will be here soon? Zhuowen said indifferently. Tang Ji's face froze, then he said, yes. Once the upper family's people know that I failed, I'm afraid my life will be in danger. Senior, for the sake of this junior's honesty, let this junior go this time. Otherwise, when the upper family's people come, we will all die. Not necessarily. After I deal with the upper family's people, I'll think about how to deal with the two of you. Zhuowen's eyes were calm as he swept the two of them into his spirit ring. After that, Zhuowen used the shapeless all beings and the aura on his body began to change. His face even squirmed and turned into Tang Ji's appearance. As Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the demigod realm, Zhuowen released his divine sense, controlling it to the strength of an early heavenly god realm expert. Then, he leisurely sat on a stone table under the shade of a tree in the courtyard. After waiting for about 2 hours, Zhuowen discovered that the door of the house had been quietly opened and 5 people walked in. The 5 of them were all men. The leader was a middle-aged man with a sinister expression. His cultivation was the highest out of the 5 of them, at mid-god. The other 4 were all early gods. As soon as he came in, the middle-aged man noticed Zhuowen. He led the 4 people in front of Zhuowen and said coldly, Tang Ji, where is he? Zhuowen pointed at the seat opposite him with his right hand and said, take a seat first. Long Wen still hasn't returned until now. We'll capture him together once he returns. The middle-aged man stared coldly at Zhuowen, but he did not sit down. Instead, he slapped the stone table with his right hand, smashing it into pieces. Tang Ji, didn't you say that you could capture that person? Why are you saying that he hasn't returned yet? You're contradicting yourself. Are you messing with us? The middle-aged man was not polite at all. However, as soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, his gaze suddenly met Zhuowen's eyes. He discovered that strange, ring-shaped rainbow-colored light had appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. He saw his childhood, his family, and his friends in the rainbow-colored light. When he extended his right hand to touch the family he saw, he only felt pain in his dantian. Then his eyes cleared up and he stared fixedly at Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen's right hand had already pointed at the middle-aged man's dantian. Following that, the middle-aged man's face filled with pain. He could clearly feel that his dantian had shattered. My lord! When the middle-aged man's dantian was shattered, the 4 early heavenly god cultivators reacted and attacked immediately. Unfortunately, Zhuowen pointed with his right hand and countless sword shadows transformed into terrifying thistles and thorns, instantly trapping the 4 of them and killing them. You're not Tang Ji. Or you? The middle-aged man clutched his stomach and stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. He knew Tang Ji's strength very well. It was impossible for Tang Ji to ambush him, let alone kill the 4 early gods. Zhuowen looked at the middle-aged man indifferently and released Tang Ji and Tan Haibao from the spirit ring. Tang Ji and Tan Haibao were still in a daze. However, when they saw the 4 early celestial gods on the ground, they were shocked. Then, they turned around and saw the middle-aged man. Lord Tan Yu, the upper house actually sent you to help us this time? Tang Ji looked at the middle-aged man in surprise. He had interacted with Tan Yu a few times and knew how powerful the latter was. However, in such a short period of time, 4 early gods were killed and Tan Yu's dantian was shattered. How could he not know who the culprit was? Looking at Zhuowen with a complicated gaze, Tang Ji was secretly regretting. He did not expect that not only did he kick an iron board, but he also got himself into big trouble. The young man in front of him was only a demigod. However, from the strength he displayed, Tang Ji already thought that Zhuowen was an expert above the late gods. Or you? Did the other vice stars send you? Tan Yu quickly calmed down and said coldly. Zhuowen looked at Tan Yu and said, I heard that you're from the Dark Star. Was it your master's idea to buy a demigod rogue cultivator from a human trafficker? However, Tan Yu's face was filled with a cold smile. He glanced at Zhuowen mockingly and did not say anything else. In his heart, he had already determined that Zhuo should be the spy of another vice star. Seeing Tan Yu's expression, Zhuo did not want to waste his breath on him. He pressed his right hand on Tan Yu's head, intending to forcefully search his soul. Your divine soul. Tan Yu looked at Zhuo in fear. The moment Zhuo searched his soul, he saw the boundless starry sky in Zhuo's divine soul. Under this starry sky, his divine soul was as weak as an ant. Zhuo's divine soul was much stronger than Tan Yu's. Tan Yu did not even have the right to resist. The memories in his divine soul were completely checked by Zhuo. From Tan Yu's memories, Zhuo found that Tan Yu was really one of the Dark Star Lord's men. Moreover, it was the Dark Star Lord's order to buy a demigod rogue cultivator. As for why the Dark Star Lord did this, Tan Yu did not have the right to know. Originally, Zhuo was still casually checking Tan Yu's memories. However, when he reached the end of the memories, his body trembled. In Tan Yu's memories, a strange scabbard suddenly flew over from the starry skies 60 years ago. The speed of this scabbard was extremely fast. Although many gods in the Dark Star Lord noticed it, they did not catch where the scabbard landed on the Dark Star Lord. Coincidentally, the Dark Star Lord was in seclusion at that time. After a period of time, there was a craze to search for the scabbard in the Dark Star Lord. However, no one found any traces of the scabbard. Instead, many gods died in the process of searching for the scabbard. As more and more gods died, many gods gave up on searching for the scabbard. Although the Dark Star Lord was extremely concerned about this matter after coming out of seclusion, after sending out many gods, they still could not find any traces of the scabbard. Later, the matter was left unsettled. This memory was not particularly deep in Tan Yu's divine soul. Clearly, Tan Yu did not care too much about this memory. However, Zhuo knew that the scabbard that suddenly flew over from the starry sky was very likely the blood-splashing 5 steps that he was looking for. However, what made Zhuo strange was that the blood-splashing 5 steps was only a substandard god tool. Even if it had Xiao He as its artifact spirit, it should not have the ability to travel through the starry sky. Zhuo then thought about how many gods died in the Dark Star Lord's search for the scabbard. This made Zhuo somewhat uncertain. The blood-splashing 5 steps was only a substandard god tool. How could it have the ability to kill gods? This made Zhuo suspect that the scabbard was the blood-splashing 5 steps. Looks like I have to take a look at the Dark Star Lord's divine soul. Zhuo rubbed his forehead. Although the scabbard in the Dark Star Lord's divine soul might not be the blood-splashing 5 steps, Zhuo still had to make a trip. After all, everything was too coincidental. Zhuo glanced at Tan Yu, who had fainted because of the soul search. However, he did not kill Tan Yu. After the soul search, Zhuo completely erased the memories of him from Tan Yu's divine soul. Whether he killed Tan Yu or not, it did not affect him much. After collecting the spirit rings of Tan Yu and the other 4 early heavenly god stage cultivators, Zhuo burned the corpses of the 4 early heavenly god stage cultivators to ashes. Then, he said to the silent Tang Ji and Tan Haiba, "I'll leave Tan Yu to the 2 of you." Tang Ji was a smart person. He knew that Zhuo was planning to spare their lives. He quickly nodded. At the same time, he took off the spirit rings on his body and handed them to Zhuo. He said, "Senior, this is Junior's collection of many years. Take it as Junior's filial piety to you." After speaking, Tang Ji took out a piece of golden paper from his bosom. There was a seal at the end of the golden paper. "Senior, this is Junior's house deed. Junior has no use for it, so I'll give it to Senior," Tang Ji said with a flattering smile. Since Tang Ji took the initiative, Zhuo naturally did not refuse. It just so happened that he was lacking divine stones right now. After doing all this, Tang Ji put Tan Yu into the spirit ring. After bowing respectfully to Zhuo, he left the house with Tan Haiba. Tang Ji's dantian was broken. Now, he urgently needed to recover his dantian. As for Zhuo, he did not dare to stay a moment longer. He was afraid that Zhuo would go back on his words and kill him. After Tang Ji left, Zhuo entered the master bedroom and began to check the 6 spirit rings he had just obtained. Among them, the spirit rings of Tan Yu's 4 subordinates had the least amount of wealth. Other than some divine stones, there were some miscellaneous items and materials. Although these four people's spirit rings had the least amount of wealth, there were more than 10,000 divine stones in total. It was more than Zhuowen's current wealth. After Zhuowen opened Tan Yu's spirit ring, his eyes immediately lit up. There were many things in Tan Yu's spirit ring. Just the divine stones alone were more than 100,000. There were even many level 1 divine medicines inside. Other than that, Zhuowen also found a heavenly divine artifact. Previously, Zhuowen's attack was too fast. Tan Yu did not even have time to take out his heavenly divine artifact before his dantian was broken by Zhuowen. This heavenly divine artifact was a long spear. This spear was completely black. Its appearance was like a carbon rod. There was nothing special about it. Zhuowen had also used spear-type weapons before. He held this long spear and casually waved it. He felt a surge of law energy from the spear light. Although this long spear is relatively ordinary among heavenly divine artifacts, it's still passable for temporary use. Zhuowen did not have any heavenly divine artifacts now. If he equipped this long spear, it would more or less increase Zhuowen's strength. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.